Looks like we got Taylor.
How's it going?
All right, we can hear you.
Looks like we
Everything's
got
good. Hang on one second, because
Taylor.
my I'm having an
You,
echo on this side.
is your YouTube going?
Hold on, wait. Can you? All right, I don't hear it anymore.
All right.
All right. So Taylor, tell us about yourself, man. I mean, that was a pretty good debate there. I mean, you guys are up and coming, so I had never heard of you guys before, but I definitely appreciate you coming on. And why don't you tell us like about what's your channel, what's the reasoning behind your channel, and then also about yourself, like how long have you been doing um how long have you been doing this, and yeah, just tell us
Okay.
about
Well,
yourself.
thanks for having me. I started the channel like 2 or 3 years ago, and initially it was
Hmm.
like it's kind of always been about debunking. Like my first videos were debunking like whether you could put a sword on your back. um, that was kind of more historical, and then I went into Islam a little bit, and just recently, about a year ago, I've been doing like almost exclusively like creationism, and throughout this whole time I've been working on a model for objective morality because I'm very disappointed in like the atheist side that takes the position of moral relativism. I think it's a very
Hmm.
weak argument. And then as far as my channel name goes, um, I get it from just the fact that I think it was rational for Adam and Eve to listen to the snake and get the knowledge of good and evil because, I mean, even without it, they would have not known what right and wrong is in the first place. So they have no way to even obey and not eat the tree
Okay.
without it.
Well,
And
well, yeah. Go ahead.
uh, oh, I was also gonna say that a little bit of history is like the reason I am an atheist is because I went to a Catholic high school. Um,
Hmm.
for various reasons, they had a pretty good science program and stuff like that. It was I toured it, liked it in general, but there was a huge draw for me in like I wanted to know if God was real, and if he was, that seemed like a likely place to be able to learn, and because we have Bible classes and everything like that. And through reading the Bible, that's basically why I'm an atheist. Um, and then one more thing, I have a friend with me. I hope that's okay that she joins us.
Yeah, that's fine. That's not a problem at
Yeah,
all. I can bring her in separate if you want, or you can just she can just stay on your side or
yeah,
whatever. So I guess that's a good place to start then, because um, I, I can see why you might would think that the snake was justified. I don't think it's. Oh, what's up, Dragnot? Dragnot just subscribed to me. He says in the chat, popcorn. Awesome. Drag, if you want to come in, you definitely can. I'll shoot you a link over on your email, and if you want to pop in, that's fine. So actually, I might have already sent you the link. Yeah, so I just sent it out. Dragnot, you were in on that. So, all right. No, that's fine. That's fine. You're just listening. All right. So I guess that's a good place to start is with the serpent. So, number one, I would say, um, you basically are saying, hey, maybe that was a good thing that the serpent said, hey, listen, let's what why doesn't God want you to know the knowledge of good and evil? And I can see where you might go, yeah, why wouldn't God want us to know? But here's the thing: it doesn't say that God was never going to tell Adam and Eve or show them the knowledge of good and evil, but rather, what how I would put it is that you need to be um, eased into certain things. So, for example, if you've never killed a person and then you kill someone, it instantly affects you. Instantly, you can just watch interviews from prisoners. But if you're a hitman and you've killed 100 people, the 101st one, it doesn't affect you. So it's not. There was nothing in the story that says God wouldn't eat that God wasn't trying to ease them into the knowledge of good and evil. All it says is that They were told not to eat from that tree at that point. And then the second point I wanted to make was it's not clear that although there is serpent language in the passage for sure, and the deceiver has always been compared to a serpent, whether that's in dragon form um, or in snake form or whatever. The term Nakash, according to Dr. Michael Heiser, who is an expert in ancient Semitic languages, he says that it means something like the shining being. And if you look at, for example, in the Old Testament in Isaiah, where it says it calls Satan the day star, it says, "Hey, oh shining one, how did you come to fall from heaven?" And then in the New Testament, it says Satan can appear as an angel of light. It kind of makes sense to say, well, this was obviously a shining being or a luminescent being. So I would just point out, though, regardless of whether this is a story that it was simplified with the snake language for readers to be able to easily remember, because at the time when you're not able to write down things, you typically use stories in order to um, remember things for memory, for posterity. But also, like I say, it doesn't say that God wouldn't ease them into this knowledge. So maybe I can hear your response to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like, why wouldn't he prep us for that? Why would he have that test there if he didn't expect us to know? He could have just withheld the fruit until after the lesson plan or something like that. By the way,
Okay,
this
but
is Katie.
hey, Katie, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Are you? I guess you're an atheist or a non-theist
Yeah, I'm an
as well.
atheist.
Okay, and I guess you guys share the same point of view. Messenger, you're a Christian, right?
I would say I'm a theist who
Okay.
believes in God and follows the teachings of Jesus, but I don't subscribe to a lot of modern day mainstream interpretations of Scripture. So I have some variances there.
Okay. All right. Did you I've got some other things I wanted to ask um Taylor about, but did you want to add anything right now?
Oh no, I'm just going to let you go back and forth, and then when we start to get into topics of defining points and positions held, I have some questions for Taylor about the debate, and hopefully, did you get the link out to that Colin person so they could come in yet?
Yeah, I did send it to him. I'll bring him in whenever he gets here.
Okay.
So Taylor, I guess another thing I want to talk to you about is unfortunately I wasn't able to really listen to every point because I was moderating. I was trying to do three things at once. But I did kind of get that you don't believe that morality from God could be objective. Can you explain why again?
Just if it's from God exclusively, just by the mere definition of objective, because if you remove God, then morality changes, so it can't be objective. It's based on God, so it's
Well,
subjective.
maybe you could define what you think objective means in that context.
Okay. I have the definition I like to use. It just objective refers to the
Just
elimination of subjective perspectives, which and
okay. So
subjective
the way I,
means personal feelings, perspectives, opinions.
mm, okay, so I pretty much agree with that. The way I would put it is, it's valid and it's an objective moral is a moral that's objective. It's valid and binding regardless of human thought or opinion.
Yeah, and I would
Can you
say
agree
that
with that?
extends to anything, not just humans. It's true regardless of any being's opinions.
Well, I'm not so sure about that actually. Are you familiar with normative ethics?
Yeah.
So I would say that human normative ethics, why extend that beyond humans?
Well, otherwise it's not objective.
Right, do you have any reasoning for that, or you just define it in that sense? Like if it goes beyond us, then it's not objective.
Well, there is a reason why objectivity is superior to subjectivity, but yeah, just as far as that goes, it's just because it's not objective.
Okay, so let me just first handle the first part, the that God can't objective. God's morality cannot be objective. So let me ask you this.
God's morality can be objective. I'm just saying that it's going to exist independently of him, and it's going to exist the same whether he's there or not.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If objectivity means regardless of human thought or opinion, then you're saying that anything that's from God cannot be objective in that sense?
If it's contingent upon God, then it's subjective in relation to God.
In what way?
Just that's what subjective means.
No. All right, so let's play this back to the beginning because this might make it easier for you. So there are a plethora of not only theists but atheist philosophers who believe in objective morals. And if, let's say, for example, with the theist, God is the only being that exists before creation, right? All right, wouldn't it stand to reason that whatever God's morality is before anything else ever existed, that whatever it is, that is the standard of morality?
This is Katie. I'd say no. I think that there are things that are objectively moral and objectively immoral, such as things like owning another person and rape, both of which are seemingly fine and moral according to God. So that's the subjective nature of God's morality, which I disagree with.
I would say that was a straw man argument. So
I have a question about that, because how can you have any level of objective morality when the things that dictate morals, ethics, laws all come from a subjective nature of a being? Because objective means it's factual in its basis, which means it's not going to vary from person to person or from entity to entity. So if for something to be objectively moral, it has to be factual in its basis. It has to be a objective, factual, evidence-based standard.
Yeah, so
I would just add real quickly, just because God is the first being, it doesn't mean he's correct.
Yeah, so no, that's so. Here's what I'm saying. How do you? Okay, so Katie, you guys said hey to Tony Designs, hey to Math Pig, hey to Jesus the Lord, hey to all you guys. So you just said that things like slavery, for example, is immoral.
Yes.
What do you ground that in? How do you know that?
So when we're talking about the morals as they relate to interactions between humans, you kind of have to look at how does it affect humans, and there's various ways to judge whether a thing is good or bad. I think pretty much all of us can look at something like rape or slavery and see the negatives. We've evolved to have empathy. We know that we have pain. We know that we prefer freedom, things like that. So there's ways to kind of test our claims about morality. Yeah, it's kind of subjective when you think, okay, feelings are involved, but how could you possibly have any sort of morality without feelings? Like, that's the nature of humans.
Yeah, Snake, do you agree with that then?
I would add, like, I try to eliminate all subjectivity, but I would say freedom is an objective value that we can use.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you the same question. How do you know that?
Well, because we can see whether it's objective or not, and it is a ethical recommendation, and we can.
Yeah, but do you see what? Hold on. But do you see? I ask you, how do we know that it's objective? And you said, well, we can tell whether it's objective or not. I'm asking you that. That's the question. I'm asking, how do we know that?
Okay, so
remember, what you know is what you can prove. So keep that in mind when you're using the term "I know." This is true.
Yeah. So it's not self-contradictory, and it's consistent.
So your only standard for objectivity is that it's consistent with reality and it's not contradictory.
Yeah.
Because God's consistent with reality and not self-contradictory. So that wouldn't be, because that contradicted your earlier statement.
I think we're kind of mixing terms here, because there's a difference between something being objective, as in you can prove it with like empirical facts, and something being objective because there's like the absence of emotion or thinking or like those types of things that go into it. As far as objective morality, it's things that are true 1,000 years ago and true today. And it's in relation to the question of moral relativism. So I think that rape was always wrong, even though rape was okay apparently during Bible times, and God apparently
That's
is
a straw
pleased
man
with rape.
mischaracterization.
How
Yeah,
is that
that's
a
a
straw man?
mischaracterization because well, first of all, that's going to take us that's what we call a red herring in an argument. When you are having an argument about objectivity, and then you bring up something else that we have to go chase down. So now we're going to
Well,
have to chase down a
you
Bible verse,
started
and we're going to
out.
have
I
to hold on a
think.
second. Let me finish.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Let me finish. So then I'm going to have to chase down a Bible verse that you found in which there's over 2 billion Christians in the world, and then you'll have to say, well, this promotes rape, and then I'll have to say, well, no, then why do over 2 billion Christians in the world disagree with you on that passage? And then you see what I'm saying? We're going to have to chase that down. So rather than that, let's stick to objectivity. And then I'm going to ask you guys again because I still haven't really heard. And I see Colin. I'm going to bring you in, Colin.
So
I just want to finish with this. Like, objectivity means regardless of who believes it or not, it's wrong. And I'm wondering, how do you find that out?
Well, do most of you understand how moralities are developed within human beings? Do you understand? Because if we can't understand ourselves first, we have no idea how to understand or define a creator that made us the way we are. If we subscribe to that. So to get to any root cause of, if you're going to talk about things that are objective or subjective, either in your viewpoint or perspective, or if you want to get further into, is it objectively moral or subjectively moral, you have to understand how and why people develop the morals that they have. And that's the, like, when you're talking about defining concepts and understanding things, I heard very vague terms. They're not dictionary definitions of objective or subjective. They're not even philosophical definitions of objective and subjective. They're just your perspective based on how you've experienced life to this point. And if you use terms very loosely or in a way that's not consistent, then I think Katie was right. Is it Katie I'm talking to, female over there?
yes.
Yeah, you said something that we think you're talking past each other or not using terms the same way, and you're right, because I really think that you have to clearly define specific terms if we're going to discuss specific terms.
Well, we did. Taylor and I agreed that objectivity is regardless of human opinion.
Well, it's not just
transcended,
but it's not. It can't be beyond thought, because if we're not thinking about it, then we can't process
Well,
it.
let me give an example.
I'm just
Yeah, go
referring
ahead.
to originally the concept of moral relativism was brought up, which is how the thought of objectivity came into the conversation. And then I think objectivity moved from, okay, there's an objective moral truth beyond like moral relativism and beyond the context of culture and time. And it moved into this sort of objective as being not related to emotion. And I think I agree
Okay,
with
so
what
let me.
Messenger's saying about how like you have to have emotion in it, otherwise you can't judge how a thing is good or bad.
Okay, so let me pick up there. So I guess I've been doing this a long time, and I guess what I do sometimes is I assume that people are familiar with the philosophical material on this. So it didn't change at all. Objectivity, objective morals, just means every time there's no like other definition. It just means that it's a moral that's independent of human thought. It doesn't matter about the time period or what. So I'll give an example. Okay. If so, this is an example between subjective and objective. Let's, even if, and this might help you too, Messenger. So if it depends on human thought at all in the least, then let's take a hyperbolic example. If the Nazis would have won World War II and brainwashed everybody that still lived, or killed off everyone who didn't agree with them, that killing Jews was a good thing, they would still be objectively wrong, even if everybody in the entire planet thought it was right. That's what I mean by objective morals.
And I would say that no matter what God's opinion is, we can judge it wrong or right, no matter how many people think it's right. Because if
But
But
that's
Snake,
not
what standard
objectivity.
are you using?
It's not just humans; it's any being. Any beings.
Right, but that's not
But-
There could be
objectivity, though.
aliens. There could be non-human, intelligent beings.
But Snake, you're using your own human reasoning. You're not using actual reasoning beyond your own. You're not using anything transcendent beyond yourself. You're using your own reasoning. So what standard do you have for that?
Nor are you. You're just assuming the complete.
So
Sorry,
let me
what
just say,
standard
that's
are
not-
you using to say that wiping out the Jews would be wrong if there was nobody to understand that it was there?
Like if it's only
I'm
God
saying
because God says so, that doesn't make sense. It's wrong.
No,
matter what
it's
God
not-
says,
no, you're.
It's
you're
not wrong because
misunderstanding.
God says
Hang
so.
on,
Sorry,
Tom.
go ahead.
Hang on a second. So it's not just merely because God says so. It's because there has to be in order for something to be objective, there has to be a standard of objectivity. Okay, so if, like, take a ruler for example.
How
Is
is
a
God
ruler-
an objective standard though?
Well, let me finish. So you have to appeal to standard no matter what. Let's say a ruler, let's say that we're trying to measure something, and I say it's 1 ruler long. Well, if you say the ruler's 11 inches long, and I say it's 12, like, obviously we're going to disagree. But if there is a standard of that precedes the human mind that accounts for how long a ruler is, then it makes sense that humans would have to appeal to that standard or make up their own subjective standard.
Why? Just because it's first?
No, because not just because it's first, it is the only standard. So whether humans believe it's right or not, it is the only standard because, again, think about before anything ever existed, universe was created or anything, you only have God and God's morals. God is what we call good. So when we strive for something, we have to be aiming toward a standard. Let me put it this way. What is moral progress in your view?
Well, coming to know better morals so that we get closer to the ideal. And the churches have all had moral progress. They don't behave according to biblical slavery law anymore. That's all because of the influence of secularism.
See, that's again, I deny that. I say it's false. But again, that's what we call a red herring. It's where we're talking about one thing and then you go, but the
We're
church,
talking about
because of
moral
this one.
progress.
We're talking
Yeah,
about
so-
the morality of God as laid out in the Bible, which is, I assume, how you claim to know the morality of God. So,
Well, that's getting into more in-depth things because
Yeah, right. Because
we're-
Messenger is
we're-
not a Christian. He's just a theist. Like,
we're just attempting right now to define what moral objectivity is.
so
And to,
right. And so,
Converse Contender is stating that it's something that doesn't require human opinion or perspective. Because
Right.
you can have a human thought
and
that's
so
objective and factual based, like, hey, the tree is green.
So
That's
let's not get off
objective.
point, Messenger. Let's not get off point with that. So you said that we have to, in order to have moral progress, we're moving toward an ideal. That ideal is what I call a standard. Okay, and then here's the thing: where does this ideal or this standard come from? How do we know it? Like, that's what the whole question of objectivity is about. Is there a standard? And if it is, how do we come to know that standard? Is it just based on our opinion or how we feel, or
I think you can build a standard purely based on the idea that something exists and nothingness doesn't exist.
Are you saying the only standard is you exist, so that's your standard?
No, something exists at all. It wouldn't matter whether it's
So-
humans or not. That's the point.
So since something exists, there's a standard, but nothing set the standard.
The fact that something exists set the standard.
what?
So
wait a second.
the thing that
Set
exists
God's
that's
standard.
not alive.
Who said God?
What do you
So-
mean? Because he created. There's nothing that existed outside of him until he created.
How is that
He was
a moral
eternal.
standard, though?
because he made us in his image, in his world, and we're in his image, so we are to be representatives of him,
But again,
defining in his
how do
character,
we know that that image is something to be idealized?
because he tells us to that it is.
That sounds
You want to
like-
use the Bible? I'm going to use the
That
Bible.
sounds like every charlatan, every false religion I've ever heard of. It's
Well,
true because
let's put
I
it.
say so.
No, that's not it.
No.
So let's put it this way, Taylor. All right, have you ever heard of the Euthyphro dilemma?
Yes.
Okay, so that may be a helpful example. People say, does God command it because it's good, or is it good because God commands it, right?
Mhm.
All right, that's a false dilemma, because in the premises it says, does God command it because it is good? And when they use the term good, they're using it wrong, because what we believe is that God is what Plato called the good. And you can rationalize it in this way. If God is all that there is, then God is the standard. And then if God created beings outside of himself, it would make sense that being the standard and you created humans, that that your standard would apply. Now, what you want to do is hold God to your human standard. That's what I would call being backwards.
So you've named.
Do you get what I'm
You
saying?
named the standard, and you've defined it as God. But how do you know what the qualities of that standard are?
What do you mean by qualities?
The values you hold.
If you just define God as good, you're just swapping a label. What does that even mean, though?
No, I didn't just define God as good. I told you that I made an argument that if God is all there is, then God is the only standard there is. And then if God creates from that point, it would stand to reason that they would appeal to his standard because he is all that there is. And then
But the
something
argument to that, I'm sorry, go ahead, finish.
I was going to say, like, so humans are secondary. God is primary. Because humans were created from God, the highest standard that God could appeal to is himself. He couldn't appeal beyond himself, if that makes sense.
Well,
Sure, but my argument to that would still be, from God's singular, only existent standard, how is it still not subjective from his viewpoint and being?
because there must be a reason God
Well-
is the way he is, right?
Well,
That's his
he
I completely agree that if God's the first and he's an original standard, he's an original objective morals, ethics, and values according to his being, that still does not make it objective. It's still subjective, even from his own nature.
No, it's not, because if God is the only being there is, thus he is the only standard.
But he could be evil.
Then he
But then an atheist,
no.
could say-
Hold on, wait. Let me pick up on that point.
because
if
then
God-
if we came from evolution and the first Homo sapien that walked the planet from an evolutionary standpoint that had the level of cognitive thought we have, then an atheist could sit there and say the original human was the objective standard for all morality in the world.
Well, I don't understand why you made that point. Like, what
I made the point because you're saying that God existed first and he was the first. So when I say, if you look at it just from that standpoint, God is objective from his own
Right,
standard.
okay, I see what you're saying.
Mankind.
But,
No, so
but what's the
humans
standard? What's the
humans
standard
are-
for that? Like moral guideline for that descendant? Sorry, go ahead. I
So
apologize.
humans are secondary, okay?
According to a theology or a Christian belief or deist belief.
Right, and that's all that. Obviously, you have to do what philosophers call inter-worldview critique, where you go into a worldview and critique it from the inside. So
That's fair.
that's what I'm doing to Taylor there. I'm saying, well, hang on a second. What is objective morality? And then he said, well, we can think of an ideal. And I'm saying, when you use the term "we can think," you're not objective. You're being subjective. In fact, there's no objectivity to anything that humans think or feel.
But we can
That
think about
is-
That's not a
objective
fair, I
things.
don't think that's a fair statement, because human beings can have an objective perspective. If we say 2 + 2 = 4, it's an objective standard. If we say that the sky is blue, when there's no
I
cloud
agree,
cover,
but it's not. But but 2 plus 2 equaling 4 is grounded in laws of logic.
The laws
Now,
of logic are set forth based on our viewpoint of the world, which is our thoughts.
So then answer. So I guess answer the question: What is your standard of? I mean, how do you get an objective? How would you even know an objective moral?
Well, I would know a valuable moral. I can't say because remember, morals are just the values that we hold to be true that meet our viewpoint of the world. So when we
hold on a second, because I think we're going to equivocate on the term moral there.
I don't think it's equivocating to say that morals are the values that you hold to be true in life, and that the ethics are the standards and step by steps that support those morals, and laws are basically communal governance and enforcement of those ethics and morals.
No, because I can hold something to be that I want. So you said it's something that we hold to that. What was the exact wording that
it's something that we hold to be true that supports how we view the world and supporting the needs that we have within it.
So that assumes subjectivity in the premise because
it always is.
So that's what I'm saying. That's why we're different, because if you were to say that you're using morality is based on something that we value. And what I'm saying is morality that you can use that in a normative sense, because there are certain things that we value and want, and we can call moral, but you have to split up deontological morality, deontological and normative ethics. Because something that's like, for example, a deontological statement is an object. It's something that should be desired, that is objective and binding. So in that sense, there's some obligation that comes with it. You could say, like, a normative ethic, you might say something like, well, it would be right to save a child that's in the water when you're on your way to work, but you're super late for work. So it would be right to save that child, okay? But in a deontological sense, you have a duty. It's not just merely people think you should do it. It's that you actually have an objective duty or obligation to do that thing, or else you're immoral.
Where does that objective duty come from?
Well,
that would be my question.
I mean, I agree
so
that my model is dependent on imperatives. Like, you should do this, you should do that.
Right. That's what I'm saying is obviously on my model, God has created a standard. So God's the standard of my model. Now, that's what I'm asking you guys is, what is the standard of your model?
Essentially,
is it just mere opinion, human reasoning?
So you can understand ethics without knowing anything about Christianity or God. You can come up with reasons why you should not.
Now, I'm not saying you can't know that. Yeah.
Of course, you're made in the image.
Right.
You're made in the image of God.
So that's the Christian appeal.
Reasoning. It has nothing to do with.
No, I said. No, that is because you are made in the image of God. Otherwise, why is it wrong?
But other things
so let me explain that.
The image can make that same logical step.
Okay, so here, let me break this down. Let me try to make it a little bit easier. What he's saying is, of course, you can understand moral imperatives because you were created in the image of God from His worldview. That makes sense that you understand those things. But now you still have to give an answer to the question: what is the standard? You said human reasoning.
Not human reasoning.
That is not an objective.
Valid reasoning.
Just reasoning, right? That is not an objective standard, though.
Who says it's valid reasoning?
How is reasoning not objective? Like, that is the most objective thing there is.
But we're talking about morals.
No, reasoning is not subjective. Making objective factual statements is objective, but to reason them out is to ponder them, consider them based on both beliefs and knowledge.
Yeah, so I think we should discuss what the point of morality even is.
What the point of morality is?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So let's make sure, though, that we are separating deontological claims from just standard normative ethics, because a deontological claim is something that has some type of obligation,
Sure,
and
yeah,
then there
that's
could
part of
be
it.
Obligation set forth by who? That's a subjective thing to say. You have a duty to save this child from drowning. Says who? Where does that come from? That's
that was my
not you
point.
being objective. That is subjective. This is the
So maybe this
basis
will
of
clear it up.
moral debate is people getting together and reasoning what is the best course of action. What I would say the objective standard is what's not going to cause harm, what's going to promote happiness.
Okay,
So you
maybe
would
this will
say it's
clear.
subjective.
Hang on,
Sorry.
Colin. Let me just finish this last line. Like, I don't
Go
want to
ahead.
gang up on Taylor. No, I appreciate Taylor being willing and open, and Katie as well being willing and open to talk. So I think this might help clear it up. And I use this example a lot. Taylor or Katie, here's an example. I want to ask you guys a question. Why would you not use a pillow to hammer nails?
Doesn't work.
Because that's not the purpose of a pillow, right?
No, it doesn't matter what the purpose is. It just matters if it works. Because I use kitchen knives.
Oh, that's what you're saying in different
No,
words.
no, no. Hold on.
You can repurpose something, sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can use a kitchen knife to open a letter, even though the purpose
Well, I
of the
understand.
knife is not to open letters. But it works.
I agree with that. But I was given the pillow example specifically because it doesn't work to hammer nails. Because the purpose of a pillow isn't to hammer nails. It isn't to do something like
It
that.
doesn't not work because
And
that's not its purpose. It doesn't work because it's not effective in hammering a nail. I can use a rock to hammer a nail.
Yeah,
uh,
because when you use something for the purpose that it's not intended for, it's to utilize it. You couldn't utilize a pillow,
right. So that's my point.
That's what they're saying is you can't utilize a pillow, but you could utilize a rock. You could utilize a any other.
I agree. That's why I gave my specific example that I did, though, is because the purpose of a pillow isn't for doing something like that. And what I'm appealing to is, if God is the only person there is, if God is the only thing there is at all before God created, then God is the ultimate standard. Now God creates. Now the reason I'm getting to why she asked me, why would we have an obligation to save that child from our worldview? It's because we were created with a purpose. And Christ gives that, and he says, love God and with all of your heart, soul, mind, and body and strength and everything, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And those are the purposes that God gave us. So that's our purpose, is to
isn't that subjective?
help our neighbor.
He's defining the purpose, but I'm saying it would be wrong to let a child die regardless of what God's purpose is for us. Regardless of what image we're in. It's always wrong.
Right. Yeah, but you're using a subjective opinion for that. You're saying we reason that that's wrong.
So are you.
But
it
that's
doesn't
subject.
state in the Bible, if you see a child drowning, you must save them. It says,
No,
love
it
thy
does.
neighbor
It does.
as thyself. So you're taking subjectively,
You're Jewish.
you're reasoning that from that you can reason that I should save that child. That's subjective. That's using your thoughts
So you wouldn't.
and emotions to figure out what is the right course of action.
I disagree with you, obviously, but no, you're wrong. So your view is subjective. It's based on human reason. My view is that no, it's not, and I'll explain why. Because like I said, if God's the only standard there is, and He created us for a purpose, then your purpose is to fulfill His. What He created you for. Like a hammer is created for, hammering a nail. Now it can do other things besides that. Of course, it can be repurposed.
Purpose is subjective.
Let me respond to Converse Contender real quick.
Go ahead.
When it comes down to you making this, God's the first, therefore He's the objective. The only issue that lies in that, and this is something you have to address, is it requires a presuppositional belief, which means that you're holding this to be true with no evidence necessarily to support it.
No, remember, we are doing an inter-worldview critique. You have to go into the person's worldview in order to critique. So, for example, with you guys,
do you agree that it's a presuppositional worldview for me to enter?
No, what I'm saying is you have to assume whoever's worldview you're critiquing. So whenever I go to critique Taylor and Katie's worldview, I don't go, yeah, but God exists. I don't do that. Instead, I say, from your perspective where there is no God, what is an objective moral? And then he said, my reasoning. Reasoning.
To answer your question, objectively, I'd say pain is preferable to, in general, we can agree pain is, or pleasure is preferable to pain, life is preferable to death.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom is preferable to slavery. I think there's a number of things that most people kind of
right, and I would, I don't disagree with those, but I would just say they're not objective.
Well,
That's
in order to be objective,
can I add?
It would have to be a universally applicable standard.
Regardless of
can I add
opinion.
something?
Go ahead.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
Sorry, I've been a little bit silent.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to take over. I was just making sure that we were understanding each other there.
You're good. So I want to get down to that statement she just made that if you were to see a child actually drowning, what standard? Who says that's the standard? I would say, well, who says that's the standard for you? Because you're using your own logic and reasoning. Pain is preferable, or pleasure is preferable over pain, but the rapist gets pleasure out of giving that woman pain. So, and who cares if we're living? But who cares if we're living in an ungoverned, unguided universe? If another highly evolved bag of protoplasm does to another highly evolved bag of protoplasm, where this life does not matter. It's purposeless.
So there's no value to a child if there is no God.
The reason why it is bad is because there is a God.
And I would also
that's not necessarily true because the nature. Give me a few minutes to explain this.
Yeah, go ahead, Messenger.
And I'm going to get into a human behavior aspect first, and then I'm going to get into my views on morals and ethics and laws, how they pertain to it. We as human beings make time, which means we're compelled to, we're motivated to, we desire to do things according to three categories. Number one is physiological needs and meeting them, which is our need to breathe, eat, drink, sleep, excrete, have sex, warmth, and security. So we have these physiological needs that are driven biologically within our inner being, so forth that when they're not met, we will do things to meet them above all else. Number two category in prioritization is pleasure seeking. We do that which feels good and is very subjective in its nature and varies between human beings. And then the third category for what you make time for or don't make time for based on these motivations and desires is to avoid displeasure. So again, it's physiological needs number one, pleasure seeking number two, and avoiding displeasure number three. Now, based on those three categories, we formulate values, which we call morals, that support meeting those three needs for us. One of the categories, physiological, is very objective in its nature because it's biologically, chemically, and electrically driven within our brain. The pleasure seeking, what one finds pleasurable, varies between humans. What one finds displeasurable varies between humans. So that's why morals become very subjective in their nature to meet those three categorical needs. Then your ethics are rules of standards that support those values, and then laws are basically communal regulations and rules that have consequences that don't meet ethical or moral standards and values. So if that's how and why we develop what we consider to be moral, what we consider to be ethical, and what we consider to be lawful from both an individual and a communal or community standpoint, then if you're going to define that toward God, who created us in his image and likeness, which is in Genesis, and also that we should conform to that image and likeness on the inside, outlined in Romans 8:27, where it says conform to the image of Jesus, therefore we're supposed to become like this perfected being. But what does that perfected being look like? We don't have all the objective standards to be able to understand it if we're imperfect in our nature.
Right, but what we're talking about is the difference between objectivity and subjectivity.
And that's
so
my
all
point.
That may be true.
And that's what I'm saying is objective. It would be very difficult for any human being to understand objective morals if we're not perfect ourselves.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying is that's what I was getting to. Is that that's what this whole conversation was about? Was Taylor said that he had an objective standard. And then when he appealed to reasoning, and then Katie appealed to pleasure versus pain, or like well-being, for example, that's used by a lot of secular people, but they don't claim that it's objective in that way typically. So that's what I was saying is if they just, I could agree with everything they said if they just change the claim to yes, a subjective morality because
I
of the
would all
definition of objective.
So
I would also add on to that. What you're doing is you're not really describing anything more than a nervous system. Who cares? So what?
so
But because the nervous system and the subjective nature of who you are as a being still can find cognitive perspective if you're created in the image of God. So whether people believe that they are or not doesn't matter if indeed they are.
Praise, what's up?
Yo, what's up, guys?
You guys, you want to add anything to this? And then we'll let Taylor respond and Katie.
I think Colin had a point, and let him finish, and then I want to hear people's response to it.
Oh, I thought he did. Okay, go ahead. I thought he did finish.
Well, I was just saying that it's a nervous system. I was explaining from more Taylor's point of view, but I guess if you want to talk about Messenger's more point of view, I would say that us knowing we all, like Paul says in Romans 1 and 2, that we all know God exists clearly. So the
Yeah, I like to
way
make a
we
point too.
But it doesn't say. But Paul's writing to believers. He's not writing to non-believers. So when he says we all know the truth, he's not referring to non-believers who don't know the truth.
no,
But he does make specific that every person knows from the invisible and visible things in nature and all. But I'm not using that argument because what I'm doing is an inner worldview critique. I'm going into their worldview where there is no God, and I'm saying if things are objective and meaning that they're valid and binding to humans, there's some type of obligation. What makes it objective and not subjective? I'm saying there has to be something outside the human mind in which makes it objective, or it's all going to resort into the human mind.
well, I'm not even saying
Exactly.
that there is no God necessarily. I'm just saying that morality exists independently of whatever God exists, no matter what God it is.
Right. I mean, that's
There can be
the
an
claim,
objective
though.
standard. That's what I'm asking. That's what I wonder from your viewpoint, Taylor. Do you believe there can be an objective morality outside of the existence of a perfected being?
Yeah, that's my whole point, really.
Yeah, that's his whole thing. Is he said there was an objective moral.
Yeah, I mean, I could challenge that though, because Taylor needs to prove that his objective morality is not a figment of his imagination. So, Taylor, would you please, ground something that would show us that it's not a figment of your imagination?
Because God's morality has to make sense, so he's obviously bound by logic, which exists outside of
No. He's saying about your objective
Yeah.
morality. Like, ground your morality in something objective.
I just said it's
what
logic.
he's saying.
So if God's morality is also objective, then
No, we're not, yeah, this has nothing to do with God, though. We're talking about your worldview or your
well, it
position.
does, because this is how I come to it. I ask myself, does God need reasons to be correct? And yes,
But you
he
can't
contradicts himself.
appeal to a God as an atheist if you're approaching it from your own worldview.
I'm not approaching
Exactly.
it from an atheist worldview.
I thought you were an atheist.
Yeah, I am, but it has nothing to do with my model. I can assume God exists.
But that's what they're asking you. They're saying from your worldview and perspective, without considering the possibility of imaginative being, how would you approach it just from a humanistic standpoint without God involved in
My
it?
worldview is irrelevant to this single claim.
Of course it's relevant.
Not if we're asking you to define it from your worldview.
I'm not defining it from any worldview. I'm just defining it from logic.
Okay. Let me make.
illustrate real
Yeah, go ahead. Taylor.
So
Go ahead.
So God cannot contradict himself. That's something. And so I'm looking for universally applicable standards of behavior. And so essentially, again, God cannot contradict himself if he's going to use universally applicable standards. And if we're just looking at it exclusively from an atheist perspective, for example, if you're saying it's okay to rape, that is not a universally applicable standard because it's self-contradictory. saying it's not okay to rape is universally applicable standard of behavior, and so you can
Why?
because
Wait a minute.
you recommend the same thing to every
Colin.
being, and
Let's
it
go ahead.
works out.
Okay,
Alright.
but no, wait a second. Why was that universally, objectively applicable to everyone?
Because if you say no rape for everyone, if that's the standard, then there are no contradictions with that.
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay,
like the
but-
whole.
If you say that you
Yeah,
can't
go ahead.
rape, then you're going to have to apply a different standard to say who can rape and who can't rape.
Yeah,
You
but what if I
can't define the
say,
difference- you can't define the difference of that being subjective or objective?
yeah,
Islam has.
yeah, that's honestly there are worldviews that can contradict that. So like that's what I'm saying is it's either there's something subjective that like you said, all right, so I start with logic and I reason, but really you're starting with your own mind, like because even if there is logic,
You have to do that
you have
in
to
order
start
to
with
get to
your own.
God anyway, though.
What was that?
So
You have
yeah,
to reason
go ahead.
in order to say that you figured out God anyway. So
No,
reason is
but
the first
I
step,
don't.
no matter what.
No. You're talking about epistemology. Okay, I'm
Yep.
talking about ontology. What grounds? So epistemology is how we know something. Okay, so we could. You say I start with my reasoning. Well, let me finish. You say I start with my reasoning, and I reason to objective morals. What I would say is something like, no, my reasoning is flawed, so I don't start with my reasoning. Instead, the only way I could know something is if a being that knew all that could be, that everything that is true, revealed it to
There's
me.
one problem
And
with
so,
that.
yeah.
How do you know that being is correct? He could just be lying
Well,
to you.
Well, yeah, I'd like to explain a little bit of that, maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, Trey.
Well, I mean, as a materialist, you have to stay consistent with that narrative, and that means everything in reality is mechanical and involuntary. So anything that requires introspection, that requires an endowment from God. That is a teleological endowment. So tell me where your teleology comes from.
Where what comes from?
Tell me where your teleology comes from as a materialist, because you have to stay consistent with your worldview or your materialistic narrative, and that means everything's involuntary
Not
and
all atheists are
mechanical.
materialists.
But I mean, it's either biology, which is mechanical, or physics, and that would be involuntary. So, show me something that would, demonstrate or validate your teleology, and that's what it is. I mean, introspection is an endowment. So, I'd like to see what he has to say about that.
So the purpose of a moral system is to make recommendations about behavior or states of being, because decisions lead to different states of being.
Mm-hmm. So let's use examples.
Well,
so,
can I argue that point first?
Yeah,
Because
go ahead.
he said that decisions lead to different states of being, and it's backwards. States of being determine the decisions that people make.
Right, that's my point.
What's that?
I mean, things cause decisions to happen, and decisions cause other things to happen.
Well, it's your information and experiences that you've been exposed to that dictate the choices, decisions, actions, and behaviors that you partake in. So you're everything that you're grounded in is the information that you've been exposed to and the experiences that you've had, which make them all very subjective in their nature, healthy or unhealthy, valuable or invaluable. You make decisions based on those prior beliefs and knowledge based on those experiences. So again, it's your state of being is dictated by what you've been exposed to. That dictates, therefore, your decisions. Your decisions don't create your state of being.
Well, I would say that the first part of that is true, but you can have bad reasons for the decisions you make. But the decisions you make do affect things.
But those bad reasons are programmed into you by other information experiences that you've been a part of.
Exactly. He's trying to.
No.
He's trying to appeal to autonomy. Where do you get your autonomy from, Snake?
What do you mean autonomy?
You need autonomy to make these decisions and thoughts on your own. Where does that come from?
He's saying autonomy is something that's independent from other sources or reasoning.
Right.
Well, it doesn't really.
There is no autonomy. Is the answer?
So now we're arguing about free will.
Well, you can certainly, if you're arguing for free will. I'll tell you from somebody with 14 plus years of psychology and clinical counseling, free will is a myth,
I'm
and
not
I can prove
even
it.
saying
Exactly.
whether I believe in free will or not, but that's like very far off the path of
Well,
the
it just
argument
gets
we're
into.
having.
I was just
I just
rejecting
find
the
it a
statement
little
that Taylor
bit
made. That's all.
hypocritical for Converse contender to say, well, I have the objective standard because my objective standard is God. Okay, well, that's your worldview. I don't hold to that worldview.
But it's
But
not
how
hypocritical
can
because he holds it to be
let me
true.
finish.
Go ahead. Let's let Katie
So
finish. Like we're not.
how can
Yeah. Go
how
ahead.
can you say anything about anything? How can you make any moral judgment or any comment on morality at all? If the standard is just God and God is the objective because God is the first and that's what we have to all assume, then you can't really comment on morals whatsoever because if you do, you're saying that you know the mind of God.
Yeah, you're just
Okay.
interpreting.
Well, hang on. Let me answer that directly. So Katie's critique of me was that why I'm saying that my stand without, of course, without giving an objective standard herself. But if you don't want to claim an objective standard, that's fine. That's been my only point. But how is my standard objective? Let me try an example. Okay, so you're looking at us as if my worldview is that humans and God exist, and why would we appeal to God? But rather, what I'm saying is, no, we're the creation of God. So here's an example I'll give you. Let's say I were to create a video game, and in the video game, the characters were going to say, "Yeah, but why was the guy that created this video game? Why was he right about putting, a trash can here or something?" It's like the characters can have normative ethics inside the game, like amongst themselves, like. If I were to kill somebody in order to gain more points, that person would be mad at the other person. I think it's a complete mistake, and a lot of atheists are straying away from this now, to apply human normative ethics to a being that created humans. It honestly, it just doesn't make sense.
You're not really addressing my question. Basically, from your standpoint, you cannot argue about morals whatsoever because you're not God and you don't know the mind of God, and you couldn't pretend to. So if that's the objective, you can't really state what the objective morals are. You can just say, well, God is the objective. These are the morals. I'm speaking about morals as they relate to humans, and I can say objectively, rape is always wrong. You can't find one situation where rape would be moral. That's an objective standard. So you might disagree on my use of the term objective, but
yeah, that's the only thing.
I'm okay to use that term. It's a different way to use it. That's what we mean by objective. That we don't have moral relativism.
Right, but
there is no way to discuss morals at all without discussing feelings. You just can't do it unless you're going with your worldview, which is that there's the standard. But I don't agree with that worldview, and then
I know you don't.
There's no reason for discussion at all. Like, you don't know the mind of God. You can't. So you better not speak about morals because you really can't. How could you?
So I understand. Okay, so you made a few points there. So let me respond to those. One was that I can't know what I can't know morals because I don't know the mind of God. That's the whole point of Revelation, is that if God exists and God wanted to communicate to humans, perhaps he would do it through prophets. And that's why and I know you disagree with those prophets, but that doesn't make it less true, even if it is true. And then the other point,
unreliable.
When there's a contradiction, how can you decide which one is correct then?
The conscience is another one.
Yeah. You
can't really comment anything further than God has a moral standard that I can't claim to know or I can't comprehend because you can't know God. You can say that God
let me finish your
humans through the Bible, but there's numerous contradictions.
Well, so allow me to finish responding to your initial comments, because I never finished responding to your initial comments. So what I'm saying is, if God exists, he could reveal himself to humans. And I believe that he did in what we call the Bible, which some people think is a book, but it's actually a library of books. And so I would first point to that and say, if God revealed himself, then I could know what God expects out of us, for example. And then the other thing was that you said, you're making a lot of points. So I'm trying to keep up with all of them. But the other thing you said is it's objective not to rape because there's never an instance where it is fine to rape. Well, the person who rapes on a daily basis, there's an instance where they didn't think it was, and that's what I'm saying is that is subjectivity. And the third thing was you said even though like so for example, even if we all agreed except for a few people, that would not make it objective. And then the last thing was there's a fallacy called the fallacy of equivocation where you said, well, yeah, we don't mean objective in the way you mean it, we just mean it in a different way, that it's not relative. And that's called an equivocation because if it's like if I were to say that guy is good, I mean by good I mean moral. But if I say that's a good way to get yourself killed, I don't mean it's a moral way to get yourself killed. We're using the same term in a different way, and that's why we're talking past each other.
Yeah, well, I'm just arguing that if we're using objectivity in the way that you want to use it, there's really no.
Let me just clarify that real quick.
To be had.
Okay, I agree with that, but let me just say it's not the way I'm using it; it's the way that it's defined.
No, there's different ways to define it. I mean,
well, let me finish.
Sorry, they're just saying,
philosophers all use that same term that same way.
Philosophy is not the only definition of like
science uses it that way as well.
No, so there are objective standards in science for.
When does it not mean regardless of human opinion?
There's something called qualitative research where you find out, you categorize people's emotions and the way they react to a certain situation, and then you come up with patterns, and we call that an empirical. That's empirical data. That's research.
I agree, but it's not objective. That's my point.
It's subjective things that come out to an objective truth that you can say, this is what the collective people say most often. That's objectively true.
Well,
but that can't be objective.
A subjective opinion, it is an objective fact that is your opinion. I think that's what she's trying to say.
Yeah. Morals have to be subjective to a certain extent because otherwise they just don't even exist. There's nothing to talk about. If the only
they can exist objectively.
For objectivity is God set it forth, then we as lowly human beings cannot discuss morality because we're totally anytime that we do that we're being subjective. But there are ways to measure objectively the outcomes of these subjective things. So we can say, like, we come up with our standards for what's moral. So and by objectively moral, rape was wrong in any context, in any time period, in any culture. It's always been wrong.
Okay. Messengers, let me just say one last thing here and then I'll let you guys jump in. Yeah, that's fine. So again, I didn't define the term objective. It's just when you look it up in any encyclopedia, the term objective means that no matter what anybody thinks about it, it is true. It's the case. And then you said, well, we can have objectivity in yes, and you said we can have objectivity because we make a standard and whatever. When you start with we and human thought, you're automatically disqualifying yourself from objectivity. Now you can call it
because anything that you state,
but that's the tu quo fallacy.
You're being subjective.
The tu quo fallacy is when you go, yeah, I am, but so are you. Like,
but
you have to show that.
Then you are. So
yeah, but you have to show that. You can't just claim
subjective. It. And if you want to try if you want to try to discuss something that relates to people and their feelings and their thoughts, there's a degree of subjectivity that goes into it. The thing that we mean when we say we have objective morality is there is a truth that's true no matter what. There's a best course of action, whether we recognize it or not. You say that God sets that standard. I disagree. You haven't met the burden of proof to say that God exists. So I don't.
Well, we have parsimony and then Occam's razor, though.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I would just say that there's no okay, so you're all you're doing is equivocating on the term. You're just equivocating on the term objective. So I can agree with you that all those things are good that you think are good, but it's the only thing you can appeal to is human thought or reason. You can only go, yeah, because we all think it or because we reason to it. I'm saying if you any debate that we've had on the in the great debate community, philosophers, scientists, all the people who use the term, you can't just change the term. The reason why we're not disagreeing, you're actually agreeing with me. It's just that it seems like we're against each other, but we're not. Like I'm just pointing out the flaws because you can only use the term in the way that it's defined.
Yeah,
Like
I I think we do actually agree there is a objective moral standard. I just disagree with how we're able to discuss it. Like the only way we're able to discuss it is through subjective means. We reason it, we talk about it, we discuss it. I think there is
right,
an
but that's a
objective
contradiction.
truth out there. You say that you are able to claim objective truth because you believe in God. Well, there's a truth there. Just because I don't believe in God doesn't mean that I can't claim that there's an objective truth.
No, I don't say that.
Can
I
I
don't
add a
say
few
that at all.
points?
Yeah, yeah. I don't say that at all. I just the last thing I'll point out is just that you said we agree that there's an objective standard, but we get there by subjective means. And all I'd point out is you can know what an objective moral through your like perception and things, but you can't claim without God or something. Not just God, unless there's something that precedes the human mind, which qualifies as a standard for morality. There's nothing we can do but appeal to our own standards. And maybe they're right. Maybe you're right about it, but it is subjectivity by the definition. And I'm gonna take a break real quick and just walk to my grab something to drink. So I'm gonna let Messenger jump in and then Colin and Praise if you guys want to say something.
Yeah,
But one more thing. Let's not I don't want to make this something where we're like ganging up on the atheists. Like all I'm doing was I just wanted to kind of critique some of the things I heard, and like I don't want it to be like a
battle zone.
yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes when people are being defensive,
No, I'm just trying to
that
get my
it's
points out.
yeah, I agree. That's what I just want to hear the points because when people are being defensive, it almost is like then we just argue just for arguing. Like I want to hear like the actual points.
I mean, I'm trying.
So let's let them. Yeah, let's let Katie and Taylor make their points real quick.
Thank you. And yeah, no, I think that we are trying to make points, and I don't feel as if it's a defense or ganging up. I guess what I'm trying to say is there is an objective standard. There's an objective truth. We can't exactly know it. We have to try to reason by our subjective means, but I think that there exists like a right course of action. It doesn't presuppose you don't have to have God for that.
So just to clarify, and I'm looking for, I guess, yes or no's or even further explanation if you'd like. This is to Taylor and or Katie. And I have a few points before, please don't jump in anyone, just so I can get these off before we move on. So to get to this thing, you believe that it's possible that there's some unknown standard that we just haven't discovered yet because of our limitations and subjectivity. Is that correct?
I mean, me personally, I think it's discoverable.
No, it's unknown at this time is what I meant.
No,
Like you believe there's something. You believe that we're discovering things through our subjective means, but there's an objective. There's some right way, some perfect way of doing something that's just unknown at this time.
I think that I have reasoned at least partially there. I think freedom is provably a standard that we can use.
Okay, well, I think that would get down too much of a rabbit trail, so I won't touch on that because I just think that when you're talking about an objective standard, it's the belief that one could exist more so than it is I know this can exist, which means you've taken that. Hey, we as communities, as governments, have formed communal or collective standards, that therefore they're objective in their nature. And I just still think, even whether it be individual or communal, there's still going to be collective standards, not necessarily objective standards.
Yeah, I'm not saying that just because the whole society agrees that just therefore it's correct.
Because, you talk about, I think Katie mentioned the term greater good. The greater good is still determined by a collective means more so than an objective means.
I don't think I said greater good, but
You'd have to rewind the tape,
yeah,
but that was one of the phrases you made.
I could have,
And that's okay. And the only other thing I really wanted to address, and then I'm gonna turn it over to you guys to respond to me, or to Praise or Colin to jump in as well with their questions. But the other thing that I remember that Kata did say, she said something to the effect of that since we can't understand the nature of God or the mind of God or the will of God, therefore we can't understand his objectivity. Would you agree that's something that you had stated?
yeah. So meaning that, to Converse Contender's point, that the objective is set by him, then we don't know his mind completely, so we couldn't really comment on it. If there is a subjective, okay, that's what you believe, then pretty much anything you say about morality is just a subjective meandering in your mind. I think that we can kind of set certain standards as people as what's preferable, and look at things and say objectively, what is the best way to get to this standard? Yeah, the standard itself is sort of subjective, but that's what I mean by an objective morality.
Okay, because my only response to that would be, there is a piece of scripture, and I'll kind of paraphrase / quote it, because I'm not looking at it right now, but I'm going to share it. It comes in the book of Romans in chapter 12, verse 2, and it says something to the effect of, "Conform no longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will know what the will of God is, his good, perfect, and pleasing will." And we know that one's will is their thoughts, motivations, and desires. So if indeed by that Christian scripture, or that Pauline scripture, we do renew the way that we think and reason, we can possibly know the good, perfect, and pleasing will of God.
But you have to be able to confirm that. You can't just feel it.
It's not no. I'm not talking about states of feeling. I'm talking about the renewing of the way that you think and reason. Think and reason is not feelings.
But how do you know if it's correct? How do you know if it's rational?
It says, but it's a big if statement. And how would one, is what you're saying, substantiate that indeed is the good, perfect, and pleasing will of God?
Yeah, like, how do you know when you've got there?
From my understanding of psychology or clinical counseling and understanding human behavior and studying it, I would say that which is, remember I talked about meeting physiological needs, pleasure seeking, and avoiding displeasure? Yeah. I believe the truly healthy or perfect mind would be the person who feels zero displeasure in anything, seeks pleasure that does not cause harm or negativity in feeling or states of being to other people, and still meets the physiological needs for one's sustainable life.
Sure.
So that's just my best subjective understanding of how do you get to the point of conforming to that image. That to me makes the most sense from my studies, which are limited, obviously based on imperfect human beings and reasoning and thoughts and studies and research.
Yeah, and could you phrase that again? How do you know that you're not causing harm to others?
Well, it would be that which does not cause somebody to experience displeasure in a state of healthiness, which means that I'm not seeking pleasure at my own desires that also brings harm or displeasure to somebody else. Now, granted, you could have somebody who is easily offended, easily wounded, easily scared, easily frightened, easily offended by something. There's going to be things that you might do in life that cause them to feel that way because of the unhealthy nature within their biological, cognitive, experiential, and emotional processes. But what I'm talking about is more intentional things where you don't have a regard for fellow human beings. That you're not worried about, gee, I'm pouring gasoline all over somebody's fire that's already blazing, and I really don't care because it's not my problem. And I would think that somebody who's in a healthy state of being doesn't have desire and motivation to do those type of things.
All right. I mean, you would certainly need to justify what being healthy is, but I think
Well, I would just,
but
yeah,
my main point would be that it seems like you could do all that in a godless world or without any knowledge of God.
well, remember, all truth originates from some truth. So everything that human beings are things that they've been received information for, they have experienced themselves, and have been able to cognitively formulate in their minds, which therefore generate our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, things that we hold to be true. So if everything that we are exists from something else, there has to be some begin point. What is that begin point from your worldview?
I think that truth that you're talking about is basically the logical incoherence that would be true nothingness given the fact that something exists.
No, it really gets down to, like, when you look at things like complex languages, they can't originate from grunts and groans.
Yeah, they can. I don't.
The
They developed over
linguists
time.
don't have the. No, that's just a best guess. It's not a theoretical, proven, evidence-based thing from even people who are linguists.
Well, all you need is a
Right,
common understanding associated with a sound that's used as a label. You can use any
But
sound.
Taylor,
but it's not talking about being able to point and formulate some type of utterance that refers to an object. It's formulating things in a complex way. The languages that we have today are complex. Even the old languages were complex in their nature. My point is,
Complex, though.
they have gotten more complex because societies came together with different languages and they formed new languages from them, which was to have a more better way to express themselves. But they still originated from something complex. They didn't come from something as in terms of grunts and groans, as if you left a bunch of infant children on an island and allowed them to grow up. They would never develop complex language.
How do you know that? Because a baby would
Based on my
babbling and say ba ba ba, and then someone
based on my
point to that thing again and repeat ba
But
ba
that-
ba,
but
and
that
then
does-
that becomes
but that-
a word.
I'm not saying that they can't formulate thoughts like a monkey would or like a dolphin would, or they couldn't have levels of communication. I'm talking about complex language, and there's a differentiation between the two if you study those things.
Yeah, maybe I can weigh in on that.
Yeah,
I know we're going way down a rabbit hole on this.
Yeah,
one.
let's don't get into
Can I-
linguistics, honestly.
I'd love to
I actually
address
wanted
that.
to ask one question to Taylor real quick.
I have to step
Could-
away, so thank you for your time. All
Yeah,
of you
Thank you.
responding.
Appreciate it.
Likewise.
Yep.
And see.
But I wanted to ask Taylor a question. Could you use any material object to explain what the word meaning means?
Which word? Like a rock? To explain what a rock is?
No, what meaning means.
Well, you don't just start when you're teaching your baby about language, you just don't start with big concepts like meaning. You point to objects and actions, and then they can actually infer what you're talking about.
Oh, sure, but you have to have some sort of understandability to understand what the word meaning means without an object. So, would you actually be able to point to an object to say this is what meaning means? To say, because you believe that we started from grunts and groans and stuff like that. So, how would we be able to form something that is non-material within our language?
You just hold up a rock and say this is a rock, and that's what rock
Means. That's what a rock means.
That's what the
Yeah,
word means.
It's done through
That makes no
practice.
sense.
So you use
That
you use labels, so you understand how labels are used, and that's what a meaning is.
So it's
That makes
descriptive.
no sense.
Yeah, what Taylor's conflating is descriptive reality and ontological reality. That's what Colin is trying to get at, is you're going to have to show something beyond descriptive reality to say, for example, when you see the sunset at night, I mean, before the night comes around, what makes that anything beyond descriptive reality? I mean, most people say, like sunsets are beautiful. They say all these type of things that it says it hits their soul. So where does that come in as a materialist?
Because it stimulates your neurons, and those are made out of materials.
No, I don't think you're understanding. The word meaning has a meaning, which is not based off of any materials. So you cannot use the word meaning to get other animals or other people to understand what meaning means by using materials.
Well, logic exists within materialism.
Logic is immaterial.
Right.
Well, then I'm not a materialist. So don't try and nail me down.
So you've changed.
I've never used that label. I've never claimed to be a materialist.
All right.
Not once in my life.
Yeah,
So
not
there
not
are
only
immaterial
materialists.
aspects. So there are immaterial aspects to the universe, and you agree with that.
I mean, it's basically how the materials behave, if you want to call that immaterial, but sure.
But are they consistently behaving like that where you can actually count on them, and how do you know?
Yeah, and that's inconsistent with the God belief, because God can just break those rules whenever he wants. Miracles.
Never said he could.
Then you're limiting God, right? So can God contradict
No, I'm
himself?
saying
God
never said
does
he
something
will.
that is against his nature?
No,
He won't.
that's kind of a straw man argument.
No, it's
Nowhere.
just that it proves that your
There's
God
no
is limited
physical.
and there's something outside of your God limiting it.
There's a difference
Sorry.
between can do something and will do something.
Sorry. We're talking about like the laws of physics being the same, and I think what Taylor's getting at is if there's any claim that they could change, that would be like a miraculous claim. Do you not believe in miracles and things like that?
Well, I certainly do believe in miracles, but my point being is that you can't justify your appeal to these things at all.
I'm sorry?
You can't justify your appeal to these things at all because you have no basis to say, okay, well, logic and reasoning exists, but how do we know it's actually objective that it will always work apart from my own experience? Because my own experience doesn't tell me why it acts that way.
Because it's more reliable than faith, and you demonstrated that because you admitted that you don't use faith for anything
But
else
that
in
is
your life because it's not reliable.
that is faith-based. That is faith-based because you don't know.
Testing things,
You don't know when you get into
testing a model.
Okay, when you
it's just not.
Okay, so when you get into a lab and you're testing that model and something and it consistently works and then it stops working, is that objective?
I've never seen physics not work.
Well, what I'm saying is that the reason why you can rely on these things is because God is the standard. You don't start with God, you start with your own logic and reasoning and you work from there, but you don't have a basis for any of that. You can just say, my experience tells me so, but that is having faith in your own experience and you have no basis for it.
Observe these things.
That's what I'm saying is your experience tells you something, but you don't know it will work that way consistently.
You don't know that God is real. You don't know that God is good.
But what do you ground your empiricism in, though?
I do, because there are immaterial aspects to this universe that exist and are transcendent.
Let's kind of let's iron this out a little bit. So I think what Colin is trying to argue is that you have to have faith no matter what you believe at some point. So, for example, the laws of induction. David Hume pointed out that this was a problem for atheists as well, because if you see something drop, let's say an apple falls, it accelerates to the ground at a known speed, 9.8 meters per second squared, no matter the case, 100% of times out of 100. But you can't know that it will do that the next time. And that's where you'll have to have some faith that it will. And you could say, well, it has every other time. I don't have
to have faith to say that it will. It's never happened. I'm not saying that it's outside of the realm of possibility. I'm just saying I don't have any good evidence that it won't.
Right. So that's what they did. That's what you guys are using faith to have.
No, I see what's been demonstrated so far with science and the laws of physics, but I understand at all times that these things could be proven proven wrong. Science is always evolving. Science is always
Sure.
being challenged. So I'm the one that's open, and I'm the one that's not having a faith just based on just whatever. I'm not just taking it at face value and saying this will always happen because it's always happened that way. It could happen differently. That's why it's not
Sure,
a
that's
faith.
the point.
That's why it's not a faith claim.
But you assume
So
God's not doing part of that, though. So you are making
Yes.
assumptions.
Yeah.
So
I'm
you
assuming that gravity exists.
Yeah,
then why
Yeah,
do you
have-
count
You're
on
assuming that
it?
it's not grounded in God. So so you're making assumptions about reality you need to demonstrate, which you said you already demonstrated, but you haven't demonstrated it though.
So it's not faith. We're just working with models. As soon as the model stops working, we don't use it anymore. I don't have faith in the model.
So no,
What does the
I'm
model
actually
have to do with God,
skeptical
though?
Of the models, which is why we consistently keep retesting them, and we're just done with
So-
them as soon as they don't work.
Yeah, so I'm not disagreeing with
You're still
you.
you.
Well, hold on a second. I'm not disagreeing with you. The only point I'm making is that no matter what, every person has some amount of faith. Because, like, for example,
Not me.
if you're okay, so if your mom cooks you something to eat, you don't have faith in her that there's no poison in what she fixed you.
Nope.
You don't, so you wouldn't eat them. You wouldn't eat what your mom fixed you.
Just because I don't have faith that it's not poison doesn't mean that I have faith that it is poisoned. I am withholding
No. That was
There's
what
no
my
reason
point
for me to
was.
think there's poison, so I
You
ask
have
myself.
faith in your mother. You have faith in all kind
No,
of
I
people.
don't.
Like in your roommate, when you go to sleep at night, you don't. You have faith that he will not kill you in your sleep. Like everything, you. It's
could
no.
happen.
There's no use. There's no use in
I've been
trying
worried
to
about that
deny
before.
faith.
I've
Absolutely.
been worried about that before.
I'm probably going to strangle Taylor in her sleep tonight. So.
Yeah. So, but
Whoa.
it's you don't. You can't absolutely deny faith. Like you can try.
Well, I do.
But then you have faith but you have faith that that's true. Like
No, I don't.
I don't get how you can depend on uniformity and say you don't have faith when you don't
Yeah.
know uniformity has always been the same way it is now.
Well, I know faith.
I was
Especially since you don't know that it will be the same way in the future, because uniformity is dependent upon, science is dependent upon uniformity,
Well,
but
I'm saying
when
that
you
it
go
can
do
be
experiments,
not uniform.
but when you
That's a
go do
possibility.
experiment, but when you're going to do experiments, you're relying on that uniformity. So you having faith every time you step into the lab and every time you get up, you have faith
No.
that gravity will
It's
work.
been demonstrated. We've observed it.
No, I worry.
yeah,
But you don't know that it will always
I think
work.
the problem is that the way that you guys are defining faith. So, for example, in the Bible, it says that there are things that you should hope for, but it also says that you should beware of false like teachers and things like that. Like it's like okay, so and they're like you should. So you're assuming, I think, that faith means that there is no evidence at all.
Faith is not
believe-
the absence of assumptions. Faith is like a complete trust or confidence.
Right, but confidence can be grounded in evidence. So, for example, I might have faith in my wife. It doesn't mean that I know she's faithful. It means that I trust that based on what I do know.
Are you saying
Now, what
Right,
I'm
the
saying
Bible
is
tells
your
us to
induct.
test
What
on
I'm saying
things,
is,
yeah.
so let me finish. With induction or uniformity, you have evidence that that the next object dropped is going to accelerate to the ground at 9.8 meters per second. But who's to say that it won't change?
No one.
And what I'm saying is you have
It
to
could
have
change.
that is a type of faith.
It could change, and if it did,
Yes.
and it was demonstrated, I'd say, wow, it changed.
That's what I'm saying, but that is faith. I mean, like
No.
the only person that outright denies faith, like even amongst atheists, there's hardly any atheists right now, even that will even deny having any amount of faith anymore.
I've
Like
never talked
Aaron
to
Raw is
atheists
probably the
who
only
believe
one.
in faith.
So would you say, Katie, that when you get into the lab and experiment, you would have confidence in the fact that it will turn out the way it has before?
I have confidence. It's not a complete confidence, and I think that's a difference between like an assumption and faith.
Any
So
amount
why-
of confidence.
Any amount
yeah.
of confidence is faith.
Yeah, that's not.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sorry. That's just
The
not,
term confidence comes from the term confide,
Well,
which
now-
means with
Now
faith.
you're
Faith.
equivocating
Yep.
and using the
Yeah.
etymology.
No, I'm not. I'm using the direct etymological
Yeah, that's a fallacy.
usage of it. No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Etymological fallacy is only a fallacy if it doesn't mean that.
It
Right.
doesn't mean
It
that.
doesn't mean that anymore.
No, it really doesn't mean that. I mean, faith is
Confidence?
generally discussed in the context of religion, and it's basically a claim that people make when they don't have good empirical
No,
evidence.
colloquial. People use that colloquial all the
We don't
time. That's
speak Latin.
completely wrong.
We
No.
don't
Wait a
speak
second, wait a
Latin, we
second.
speak English.
Yeah, but confidence doesn't mean that you have a certain amount of belief in something given evidence, but not fully believing, not full evidence, because that's what faith is. Is you don't have complete. So
you're
I don't
not
understand how
100% sure
you're.
in your God?
You can't have faith and doubt at the same time, though, converse contender. Even in the Greek,
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
for the New Testament. Well, you said that you can't have confidence in everything. So if you don't have
No,
confidence,
I didn't say you can't have confidence in everything.
Okay.
My point was that you can have evidence with faith. For example, I might have confidence in my wife because of the amount of evidence I have she's faithful.
Right.
So if you just close your eyes and say, I believe, that's not what the Bible teaches in faith.
But faith is a compilation of your beliefs and knowledge. It's based on your experiences that you have.
Right, but what I'm saying is
the word pistis that was used in the Greek by New Testament authors means trust and confidence in someone or something.
So I can't.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
No, I completely understand that. It's
I'm just saying, like a lot of like what I think that Katie and what Taylor were saying, or I don't know if it was both or just Katie, but they were saying that from a lot of Christian theological doctrines that they hold to that definition that it's believing in something that's unseen or unheard of.
Yeah. So there are many things. Like for example, it's unseen that the laws of nature will be uniform tomorrow.
No,
That's
not
unheard of.
It's been
Oh, it's not?
demonstrated.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
You've seen tomorrow?
No, I'm saying
That's strange.
all throughout the past, it's
Like-
always happened this way. There's ways
Yeah, but that's not what I said.
There's ways to directly observe it.
Right, but that's not what I said.
It's not just a feeling.
said
it's
tomorrow.
not just an assumption. Like I might have faith. Yeah, I could say I have faith that Taylor is not going to cheat on me.
Right,
but
exactly.
but I
Let me
can't
respond to
really
her.
demonstrate conclusively with evidence that Taylor's never cheated on me. I'm not with Taylor 100% of the time. That's where the faith comes in. The problem I have
Right, exactly.
is when you apply
But
that
you have
to
evidence.
science, where it's like we measure these things, we observe them. That's where we can say it's more than just a faith. And yeah, I can
but-
hold out that like it could change.
Yeah,
But-
that's what
But
faith
the-
is.
But
majority
that's
of the
not
thing-
meaning that I have just faith in science, and that's the basis for my belief in science. No.
Well, I didn't say you don't have evidence, but if you don't know 100% of the case, like if it couldn't, like for example, if you believe or if you knew that it couldn't change 100%, it could not change, then you do not have faith. But if there's a possibility that it could change tomorrow, then no matter what you think about faith, you have to have it that when you drop that object, it's going to do what all the evidence has pointed to in the past.
Well, we don't.
And that's induction. Even David Hume, the philosopher, atheist philosopher, he pointed this out. Like you should go read Hume because he pointed out that you can't solve the problem of induction from a human can't. Like it's.
Are you
it's just
talking
the
about
problem.
Bertrand Russell?
No, I believe it was Hume that
Well, the reason we
that talked about.
the reason we do demonstrations like in classrooms and such is to prove that it still works. And so, should we use the methodology, however percentage it might be false in the future? Should we use the methodology that works 365 days a year for every year since we've been checking? Or
No, that's not the
or-
point. That's totally
or
besides the point.
Should we use the method that gets us to any and all gods? And any
No, I can
position?
totally agree with you. We follow the evidence, right? But what I'm saying is your claim that you don't have a single bit of evidence, and Caleb Dry Apologist says, yes, it was Hume that put forth the problem of induction. So, but your claim that you don't have a single amount of faith for anything, you would have to claim all knowledge. You'd have to be all knowing in order to claim that.
Or I could just be abstaining from making a judgment.
Yeah.
No, but even if you did, if so you have to make judgments in life. So if you drop something, you have faith that it's going to accelerate at 9.8 meters per second. Now you have evidence for it. I agree, But the problem is of induction is you can pass 100 red houses and go red, 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 but you don't know that 101st house is going to be red. Like I say, you should read Hume on this because he brings this up from a atheistic point of view.
Yeah, I don't
Like
know that.
it's a
If I don't
problem.
have faith
My
in
res-
the next house being red, it could be. I know that it could
well, my,
be
res-
wood.
We're
well, my
Crazy.
abstaining
response
from
is this:
judgment about what the next house is going to be.
but you do have faith in some things, whether you declare them to be true or not, because your states of belief and your states of knowledge will dictate faith in something.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, do you have confidence to pick up your toothbrush and brush your teeth?
Well, no, I don't. It's just if the toothbrush is still in my hand and it's in my mouth, then it's doing its job currently.
No, okay,
If it
that
slipped
but
through
but
my fingers, I no longer.
you're abstaining from answering the question in a
is that
genuine
really
way.
the definition of faith to you? Is that really
Yes,
what
yes.
your belief in God
Yes.
is based on? Is just like
The word
an assumption that a
pistis-
toothbrush is going to work the way that it works, that it's going to be a material object and continue to exist?
That's one example.
I mean-
That's one example of faith. Yes.
Okay, well, if that's how you're going to define it, whatever. That's different.
Nope.
I think, though, that
It's not a whatever
think-
because the word pistis in the Greek means trust and confidence in something or someone. So when you have faith in God, or you have faith in yourself, or you have faith in an object, or you have faith in another human being, that's what it means. Because they talk about the converse of faith and doubt. If you have doubt, you don't have faith. If you have faith, you cannot have doubt. Can't be on the fence.
I doubt everything.
Let me put it
yeah,
this
we're
way.
doubting things.
I doubt
So
literally everything.
if you can't have faith,
doubt that
if
your
you
toothbrush
can't
is
have
gonna brush
faith
your teeth?
and doubt at the same time, then we don't have faith. We're doubting things.
So you doubt every aspect of your fidelity with your boyfriend.
There's always a possibility of anything.
No, but either you do or you don't. Like, do you doubt or do you have faith in him?
I doubt everything.
So you don't.
I don't know.
So you
why
don't
he
trust.
has to.
You don't trust him.
Then you should doubt your belief in atheism. Then
I'm just saying,
I
you don't-
mean,
Yeah, I have questioned it.
that's the whole point. We,
So
Yeah,
don't
but if
make
you
we
doubt
don't
it
make
to
a
any
claim
degree-
that we know for certain there's no God. That's not my claim. There's no good evidence.
no, I'm saying you should
for
doubt
God.
your doubt.
Yeah,
But-
There's no good
But
evidence
if you doubt
for
it
God
and-
that I can see. I don't think you've met your burden of proof. That's why I have doubts and not.
Are you the
faith
arbiter of that?
there's God?
Right,
No,
but here's the
yeah.
thing: is if you doubt something, then you have faith in
Wait,
it. Like,
no, that's like.
let me
literally the
finish.
opposite
I thought
of what
well,
we
let me
established
finish.
as the definition of faith.
Well, I didn't establish that definition of faith because you can have a bunch of evidence for something, and if you don't know it's true, then you have faith in
So
it.
why don't we just say confidence or trust?
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm saying is the suffix of confidence is fide, faith. That you can say that you don't believe it means that anymore, but if faith means exactly what I'm saying, if confidence means exactly what I'm saying faith means, then it's not the etymological fallacy because the Bible doesn't say put your hands over your eyes and then just blindly say I believe, I believe. No, it says beware of false wolves, false prophets.
Test all things.
It says test all things. Like your definition, it sounds like you've been listening to some Arn Ra who has been proved over and over and over again wrong on these things.
He's such a dogmaticist, too.
Like-
I mean, come on, atheists. I mean, at least try to be objective with this.
My question is, why not just use the word trust or confidence? Why even use the word faith at all? For example, some people believe that God is just the universe. Why not just call it the universe then? So
Well,
why do you
because
use
it's
the word
contingent.
faith?
That's called pantheism.
Why do we have different words? I mean, what is the point of having the word
Because-
faith and the word confidence if they are literally the same thing?
It's like, why is there a difference? I mean, why do we have good and well and great and grand and spectacular and wonderful? It's like,
they have
Yeah,
different
Languages change over time.
and
so
that's why the Greek or the Latin root of something doesn't necessarily claim how it's used today. I think the thing that I'm objecting to is not just the word faith itself, but the equivocation of the belief in science with faith in God, because they're not. The two are
wasn't my
not.
point.
Well, I think that's originally how we got started on this subject about, you're saying we have faith and we have faith in science and we have faith in the laws of physics.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just not
Anything
the same,
you don't
because
know.
we can see these things, we can test them, we can measure them. We can't really test the word of God. And actually, when we do, I mean,
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so we've tested, does intercessory prayer work? We found that it doesn't.
It actually works slightly worse than just doing nothing.
Well, no, that was one study.
Yeah,
Did the Great Flood happen?
I might have studies
It
that
didn't.
show otherwise, actually.
That's actually not true either of those.
Yeah, I have
Tested
studies that show
evolution, and evolution
Cite your sources.
is the.
Here, I'll give you guys
the highest
citations.
standard of science.
Wait a second. You guys are making claims without citing sources. That's not what scholarship
Right,
is.
and I could actually provide sources
You
for that.
You can't. Hold on, wait a second. You can't. I could just say we've proven the flood with archaeology, and it's just claiming something. You can't just claim something like that. Like when you say the Bible promotes slavery, you're just claiming that.
Okay,
Like those are
I can
just
give
claims.
you the verses where the Bible promotes slavery.
Listen, I've debated.
Yeah, I'll destroy that.
Listen, hold on, wait. Let me finish. Let me just finish, and then I'll jump. I'll let you jump in.
Where women are traded and raped.
Did you see last night's stream?
Wait a second. Yeah. That's what. Okay, wait a second. Last night, in fact, I had a debate on slavery in the Bible. So, like, listen, I'm not sure if you guys. I know you guys know some verses from the Bible, but I'm not sure if you guys how long you've been doing this. But I mean, we've been debating on this topic for at least me for probably almost a decade. So I'm just saying this isn't like the first time I'm hearing those verses. Like I'm just saying that you disagree with over 2 billion Christians, and whose interpretation should I accept? I'm going to accept the one that we accept.
Well,
I mean, you can go based off your
secular morality from it.
No,
Hey, Culver,
I would accept.
Can you give me a wrench?
I would accept what the Bible interprets itself.
I need a wrench so I can share the citation. I'm going to give a source of prayer that shows it's actually empirical science.
Can you comment in the section?
Yeah, it won't let me because I don't think I have a wrench. So
you can't comment on YouTube. Or
there we go.
All right, I'm gonna give you a wrench as soon as I see your character there. Okay, I got you. Yeah, so Praise is going to give a citation about the flood. In fact,
the prayer being
about prayer, the intercessory prayer. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I would say that the whole slavery thing is taken way out of context if they actually read and let the Bible interpret itself as a harmony.
Itself?
Yes.
How can the Bible interpret itself?
Because if you keep reading it, it tells you exactly what it's talking about. And if you read before that, it tells you what it's talking about. If you read throughout the Bible, it interprets itself.
So when did God come out and speak out against slavery? Because from what I see, it has laws, it sets out clear rules for how much does a person cost. This person is worth this much. Women are always worth
so let
less
me answer
than men. Jesus didn't change
so let me answer that. So let me answer that. So you say Jesus didn't change it. First of all, Christ came and he told a lot of people different things. Like Moses told you could write your wife a certificate of divorce. I say it hasn't been that way since the beginning. So don't. So first of all, don't tell me.
Okay,
let me finish. Wait a second. You guys didn't let me finish my point. Your whole point about slavery in the Old Testament is fallacious because what you're doing is you're making a lot of assumptions about it. So you took. Well, let me finish. You took a rule. So you took a regulation on slavery, and you said, "Here's how the Old Testament regulated slavery." And what I'm saying is, my whole case is that God went to a barbaric people who thought slavery was good, and he said, now you're going to follow a different law than the other nations, and we're going to put regulations on this to start to get them off of it. So what he did was, he said things. What was that?
Subjective to the time and culture.
No, so what he did was.
Then it's moral relativism. God is
No, it's not.
practicing moral relativism. If there's an objective morality,
If I believe,
if
if I believe that my son, I treat my son different than I do other people because my son can't understand what everybody else can. You treat people in the way they can understand things until they're to a place where they can understand. Then you give them, the right and wrong. I have to teach my son through ways that I can't teach other people because of his maturation
Well,
level.
I don't
He's not
understand
mature
why
enough.
I need to believe in Jesus, so I should be treated differently.
Yeah, and in fact, it says that in the Bible. It says, I got an echo coming from somebody, but it says in the Bible that new people that are new should babes should get milk instead of meat so that's the analogy that's used in the Bible. It's saying that you should get milk until you're able to have solid food. So that is actually a biblical principle. And like I say, Christ said, Moses told you this, but I tell you that on multiple
So I
occasions.
Christ also
You know
says,
what we
slaves,
showed
obey
last
your
night too.
earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey
It means
Yeah.
your employers
Yeah,
in the
so
Greek.
slaves.
let
Obey
me
It's
your
so
answer that.
simple.
masters.
You need to
Let-
look up the Greek. The word
Yeah.
master is. It's kurios, and this means employer.
Employer.
Yeah, and
But
here's
that's
how
why they
you can
got.
understand.
That's why
What is-
they stole these people and had a price for them because they
Stole
were just an
them?
employer.
I'll give you.
What is the Greek?
I'll
for
give you an
slave?
Deuteronomy
example.
says that's
What is the Greek
a
for
penalty to death. It's an offense to death if you steal anyone. Where do you get that? That's a
If you
complete
steal-
fabrication.
If you steal a Jew in certain contexts.
No, anybody.
No, if you steal
If you
somebody
were-
else's
No, it's
property,
each.
you steal their slave that they own,
No, no, no,
you
no.
can be put to death. But you are
No,
allowed,
it says if you kidnap
what is
someone,
it,
you're put to death.
take from the heathens around you?
No,
Yeah.
you're
No.
no.
Yeah, take
you're.
of them from the heathens around
You mean
Oh, you're a
buy
Bible scholar.
from? I went through
Like-
this last night. Go to last night's
Yeah,
stream.
we had
I
a
covered
debate
all.
on my channel last night about this. So that's not what it says.
Does it
First
say
of all, you
slaves?
cannot kidnap. You cannot kidnap someone. It says you cannot kidnap someone or you will be put to death. But secondly, let's point out when you said slaves obey their masters, let's look at an example in the New. So that's in the New Testament. Let's take an example from the New Testament of a slave, like in Matthew chapter 25, where Christ says there are 3 slaves and they're paid. They're each paid talents of gold according to their skill level. That doesn't sound like what you're saying slaves are.
Yeah.
That
Also,
is-
Onesimus. Yeah.
There were.
So
you know
that's what-
gladiators
that's
are.
an indentured servant.
Are you aware of what gladiators?
Philemon.
Yes, I'm aware,
Slaves
but that's what
and they get paid. So what is the word there? Is it actually slave?
it's curious.
Does it?
And as Perry's pointed
Curious.
out,
I'm not asking for what the masters is. I'm asking for what is the word slave.
Well, I'll look it up. What's verse you looking up?
Dublos. It's Dublos, right?
Yeah, it's Dublos. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
what I thought. Yeah, so that's used as servant. So
Moses is a Dublos. Yeah, Christ.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you look it up in the LXX, Christ is
Yeah.
a Dublos in Isaiah 53.
And why is it?
Exactly.
Even Paul is a
why
slave
it
of Christ.
translated as slave?
well,
Because
you're,
that's the modern context of
Yeah.
it. So you have to get
Right.
used to modern terminology.
that's what I'm saying. You shouldn't argue based on a translation of
If
something.
Then
That's
God's word
why.
has
That's
been
why
corrupted
atheists get
and
this wrong.
No, slavery today is a whole different
God's
meaning.
doing a
So it
terrible-
has nothing to do with each
terrible
other.
job of getting that message to me. If you guys can just corrupt it with your translations.
Well, look,
If
no.
you're
Here's the
just a
thing.
servant,
You didn't-
how
you
can
didn't
they
read-
belong to your children, and their
Let-
children belong to your children
Let me-
in perpetuity.
Well,
Okay.
God
I'll answer both of
was
those.
property of Israel, and he was going to be inherited down to their generation. You're going
Right.
to say God's a slave of
Converting
Israel?
Humans as slavery. Sorry.
Plus, the other thing is, you said God's doing a lousy job of convincing you. First of all, God doesn't try to convince people. Christ hears Christ said, "My sheep hear my voice." If God wants you, you don't have a choice. Like you're gonna hear His voice. But second of all,
This is made for me.
with your let me
So
finish.
God just doesn't like us.
Let me finish. Just let me finish. If you you're saying that God didn't reach you through the Bible, I would imagine since you didn't know what we just said that you haven't read it that thoroughly. Because if you had read the book of Philemon, which is only about 1 page long, so it's not really that. Paul tells this slave owner to take back your slave Onesimus, no longer as a slave, but as a brother in Christ. He pleads with him to not take him back as a slave. There are places like, for example, I believe it's in Titus. I can find the verse where it says it's listing all the people that's going to be in hell, liars, thieves, and then it lists slave traders. So, like this whole thing, it's just based on atheist websites, like cherry picking verses.
Based on the Bible,
It's not
the fact
something
that you
that
can inherit children of slaves,
scholars.
the fact that you can beat
Is
your
this a
slaves.
diatribe?
You can't inherit
Yeah, it's a diatribe.
employees. You can't beat employees. Sorry, not gonna fly.
First of all, the word for children there, the children of Israel is a term used. It's not used to refer to a single person's child. The children of Israel just means the descendants of
I'm
Israel.
not talking about the children of
So-
Israel. I'm talking about the children of
Yeah, I
slaves
know,
that
but
are
you're-
inherited to the children of
Right,
Israel.
but the term there used is the descendants. Okay, so what it's saying is if
Yeah.
if a slave is in debt and you take that slave on, like you purchase that slave to work off their debt, and then their children, and it even says a lot of times, like if the slave finds that they want to stay with you, you're able to keep them. So
No,
like
sorry.
what do you mean? No, like
That's only for
what?
Hebrew
tell me where I'm wrong.
slaves. I believe what you're referring to is an indentured servant. They can be let go after 7 years if they are
No,
if
that's
they
not
are
what I was
Hebrew, and then they can.
No, that's not what I was
if you
referring
give them a wife
Yeah,
and
and
they
I
have
addressed this
children,
last night.
then
I could explain it.
they can. You can take them back at the end of 7 years. So they either have to leave their children and wife, or
Can I address this after
declare
this
that they love
converse?
their master and stay with their master.
Yeah, that's not what I was referring to. But like I say, we've not only did just this debate last night, but we've had this debate plenty of times, and that's not like I say. These are arguments from atheist websites. They're not something that scholars who read the Bible in full pull up and then debate.
When I was
Like,
studying the
go
Bible,
ahead,
these were my questions. I wasn't going on atheist websites. I was just reading the Bible.
well, let me ask you one question. You were studying the Bible, so it sounds like you retained some knowledge. Can you finish this? Abraham, Isaac, and who else?
Are you referring to Ishmael? Are you referring to
One
Jacob?
of the
Are
most
you referring to
one of the most common formulations in the Bible is one of the most basic there is the formulation Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Okay, so I said Jacob.
Well, you said Ishmael.
Yeah, and then I said,
first.
are you referring to Jacob? I said.
Yeah. So but here's my point: is if you had read, if you
That's
studied,
a formulation. I'm sorry. That's a line of
it's
descendants.
telling you. Yeah, but it's used over and over and over again throughout.
Can I address this though?
Yeah, go ahead, Praise.
Abraham,
It's
So-
just that you,
therefore slavery didn't exist.
So Snake and the other one in here is talking about Leviticus 25, 44 through 46. And as I explained last night, in Exodus 21:2, the word there's a vri, and it actually means foreigner. It's the same thing as goyim and in Leviticus 24, 45 through 46. So we know it's this, foreigners, you can buy foreigners, and they can get their ears pierced.
They're foreigners.
No.
So not only are they slaves,
It's the same verse in Exodus 21, though. Read what Exodus 21 says. It says they can come in and leave anytime they want. Debunked. You just got completely debunked right there. Exodus 21:2.
You can buy people.
If you can, Exodus 21:2 through 4. Read it.
Buy them, okay, but they're not
You can
slaves.
beat them. You can buy them. You can inherit their children, but they're
Here,
not slaves.
I'm going to read you the
They can do whatever
passages
they want.
real quick.
That's
All you got to do is just read it. It's so simple.
all you got to do.
Exodus 21.
21 verse what?
Yeah. So all you have to do is read verse 2, Exodus 21:2, and keep going down to 4. If you can just do that for me, that'd be
When
awesome.
you purchase a Hebrew slave, he is to serve.
Oh, there it is.
you.
Purchase the word.
Purchase.
word purchase for Hebrew.
That's the same word, kana. That's in Leviticus 25:44, and it's not Hebrew in the manuscripts. It's a vri. It's a foreigner. It's a mistranslation.
That's what I'm saying. You're
in the
using
English.
this. You're arguing from a
Are
translation.
you calling into question the word purchase or the word Hebrew?
The word Hebrew is not there in the manuscripts.
Yeah.
It's Yisraelite. That's the Hebrew word, but it's this Yisraelite's not there. It's a vri. I give a citation last night, even from a Hebrew scholar, that says a vris are foreigners.
Because you're purchasing a foreigner and not a Hebrew.
Right. It says if thou buy a foreigner, a foreign servant, 6
so
years.
Is it not
So that's
really? So it's okay to own a slave for 6 years, and then later when you purchase somebody and your children inherit them just because both
The reason why they're
times
inherited, all you have
both
to
times you're
do
referring to Hebrews in your
is read
opinion.
verse 5. Verse 5 explains why they're inherited, because they got their ear pierced as a commitment to their master for life.
So you're
There you go.
If,
So you're
however, the
admitting
slave
that
declares, I
slave-
love my master and my wife and children, I will not leave as a free person. And he's declaring that because to be able to leave, he has to leave his wife and children.
Yeah, it's a trap.
Listen. I don't want to like. I'm not. I don't want to.
Passage is what we're talking about.
Listen, that's obviously a straw man.
A straw man? No,
Right.
like the straw.
Yes.
Sorry.
Hold on.
First of
You
all,
just said
and advocating for something.
You just said, Praise, you just said that you can buy foreigners. That's slavery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
End
let
of
me
story.
answer this.
No more, that's
Well,
it.
let me. Okay. Well,
Well, so does
let me
Exodus 21
respond.
too.
Let me respond. So, you say that
Right,
the Bible advocates slavery.
Yeah.
To advocate would say, "Thou shalt own a slave."
No.
But if someone says,
It
"Here
says
are
you
the
can do it.
regulations,"
Yeah.
wait a second. Here are the regulations I'm putting on
Just
slavery.
like our government
If
did when slavery
Do you
was
know what
in.
an Ivri
It didn't
is?
say
Anyway, do you even guys know what that is? It's a Habiru. Look up what a Habiru is. That's the same thing Leviticus
when
25.
slavery was legal in the United States, there was no law that said you must own slaves. It was simply allowed because it was regulated.
well, you didn't let me finish. So, as my point has been, which it seems like you might have misunderstood me. I'm not sure. Is as Christ said, Moses gave you laws because of the hardness of your heart, and that was my point. That God went to like if you I mean it didn't sound like you knew that much about the Bible from from the point I made, but if you read the
That's
Bible,
kind of
Question?
ridiculous.
okay, well let me ask you
Like-
another question. Okay, well then you want me to quiz you again on
Abraham,
other things?
Isaac,
Like,
and Jacob.
yes, like that's used tons of times through the Old Testament. So the only reason why I made that point, I usually don't even bring that up, is because he said that no, I was studying through the Bible and that I found that. I'm like, if you were reading through those verses, you would have ran across that plenty of times.
Yeah,
So I'm
I'm very
pointing that out.
familiar with those
Let me
names of the
finish.
people and who they are.
Well, let me finish that.
I went to
So,
a Catholic high school. We were drilled on this.
well,
We
that's
had
usually
to
the problem with a
read
lot of
the
people is
entire
that they went to. A lot of times, people went to a Catholic school. Like I hear that so often. Is I went to a Catholic school growing up, and then I left the faith. Like, I mean, you hear that from everybody, from Joe Rogan to like a friend of mine. Like I've heard that dozens and dozens of times, and so I don't blame you necessarily. But what I would say is that the readings you're taking are fringe readings.
Friends?
So
They're
in the
literally
Bible.
they're
Yeah,
like the
fringe.
word of God. Exodus 20.
Really? Your
Exodus,
opinion is the word of God?
No, in your opinion, it's the word of God.
No, it's not. I totally disagreed with you
Exodus
guys, and I was
20,
explaining you.
it discusses the Ten
It
Commandments.
gives a regulation
Exodus
on
20,
slavery.
no, apparently don't know, because Exodus 20 is the Ten Commandments, which were given to Moses
Right.
from God.
What does that
and
say?
then the very next chapter, 21, still in the Word of God, is discussing the laws regarding slaves. Now, God could have said
So-
the law is don't own slaves, just as God said, thou shalt not kill.
Well, they did. Thou shalt not
Yeah.
covet. That goes right
Yeah.
under. That goes
sorry, no.
along the lines of
Covet?
slavery.
You can buy
No.
slaves.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, first of all, let me finish what I was originally saying because I mean it's not making sense. It seems, but what I was saying was that in the same way Christ said Moses gave you these laws because of the hardness of your heart, but it wasn't that way from the
Check
beginning.
the standard then.
In the same, well, see now that's shifting the goalpost. You're taking what you.
That was all
Yeah,
my
you're-
goalposts for subjectivity were always the same. If you're changing the
No,
standard,
but you're
then
no,
that's
but you're
subjective.
changing
That's
your
where we're
argument.
saying we
You're
have
saying
the objective standard and you
Uh,
don't,
Our
because
standard doesn't-
slavery
Well, let
has
me-
always been wrong in our opinion.
let me
According
finish with
to
my one point.
Your
Please.
morality, it's subjective because you have
Let me finish
to
my one point.
go
Please.
with the times.
Slavery was okay in a particular
Let me
time and a
finish.
particular place.
Let me finish my one point, please. If I were going to come to you, for example, do you guys think that? Let me just give one example, and we don't have to go way into it in depth on this. Do you guys think that abortion is wrong or is it fine?
I mean, late term abortion, not fine. Early term,
Okay. Okay, so say that I were to come to you and try to convince you that early term was wrong, for example, or anything that you believe is right. I was going to convince you that it was wrong. Do you think that I could just come to you and change your mind immediately? Like, let me give one example that I always
If you
give.
were a god, yeah.
Muhammad went to the pagans and he wanted to change their mind about alcohol. And Muhammad, I was told this by a guy that I used to talk to that was in Islam, and he said that he didn't immediately change. In fact, he weaned them off of it over a generation in Islam. And the reason why I did that is because when people are so familiar to something, like for example, I couldn't get my friend that's a drug addict off of drugs tomorrow. I would have to use certain methods in order to do so. And so, but I'm not saying that being a drug addict is right. I'm just saying I can't just go to him and say, stop. It wouldn't. First of all, it wouldn't be healthy for him to stop because he would obviously get withdrawals. But
But
that's what I'm saying. That's why you guys are wrong about this.
facts
Is
don't care about your feelings. Can
well, how did I? I didn't. What is saying? I didn't state any feelings. I didn't state any feelings. First of all, Ben Shapiro, I stated facts. So that doesn't work. It only works if I was stating my feelings.
Do you guys? Brenda Von Assen is in the chat. I think she's trying to come in.
Uh-huh.
If you guys want.
Okay, I didn't see. I haven't been looking at the chat, Brenda. If you guys want to bring somebody else in, that's fine. Let's see.
Brenda might have my email.
Yeah. No, I've got Brenda's email. I'll send Brenda a chat. An email.
Sorry,
but yeah, I definitely think you guys are wrong for that same reason. Like, you know, there are certain times when you can't just stop somebody in their tracks on certain things because they will resist you. So if God's trying to reveal himself like he did in chapter 11, I believe it is, to Abraham and so on and so forth, he came to a people that believed slavery was good. Now everything that you find on slavery that you can quote is a regulation on slavery. It's if you beat your slave and he dies, then this happens. If you purchase slaves after 7 years, this happens. Like, it's all regulation. There's not a single commandment that says it's right to own slaves. And I think you guys are just stick and stay is bound to pay. Like,
exist, and presumably God would have known this to this day. Wouldn't it have been preferable for God to just lay out good morals, and so that we had a basis to look at for our objective standard of morality that you claim that is there? Wouldn't it just be better to say slavery is wrong, and maybe a generation or two it would take them to get it, but then hundreds of years and thousands of years later, we would still have this book to go back to that says slavery is wrong. So that's much more
listen to what you just said,
much more that works a lot better than.
Well, listen to what you just said, though.
Reason what God's intention was, or what but you're coming up with that yourself. So
yeah, but listen to what you just said, though. You just said if God were to just say slavery is wrong, and maybe the first couple generations wouldn't have bought into it, but later, well, wait a second, they wouldn't even have wrote it down. They would have been like, no.
So
that's what I'm saying is
just write
God
whatever they want then. So then the Bible.
How do we know we're getting the whole story then?
Yeah.
That's a different argument.
And why does God care about our normative ethics? Our society today thinks abortion is fine, so therefore God's law should be that there's regulations on abortion.
First of all, God chose a people to himself to set apart from the nations, which is what he did.
Very racist.
How is that racist?
Well, because he said he would go and kill the other people.
He didn't tell
Wait a second.
Chinese people.
The Jews are
you guys are making a lot of claims. I said that.
You're the one that said God chose a people.
Yeah, but you're obviously you didn't let me finish my one statement. I said God chose a people to himself. Choose, like, if I were to choose somebody to myself, like my wife, that doesn't make me racist. Like, that's just a stupid claim. Like, it's just ignorant.
God can God can command Abraham to kill his son, and he was about to do it, but God couldn't.
No.
God couldn't command Abraham to get rid of his slaves.
First of all, God, first of all, you keep jumping around because you don't want to stay on the
Well, no,
topic.
I'm just like
Now,
trying to argue your
I
points to what you're saying as God had to ease people in to getting rid of
right
slavery, but God
because
has
the hardness of
God
their heart.
has proven, like shown in the Old Testament, that you have to obey him. So if God can just convince Abraham to kill his son and he was going to do it, why can't God say don't own slaves? Why can't God say stop raping your slaves and selling your daughters as property?
Because we're not pets and we're not
Hey,
like robots.
yeah, praise. Can you send Brenda an invite maybe?
I can
Well,
do it.
here's the thing. Yeah, go ahead, Messenger. So here's the other thing. Let me just start with one of your claims because there's just so many. So like you say that it's, for example, that it's racist that God chose one people. If you look at the chapter right before that, God had been trying to work with people in general, and then since they wouldn't listen at Babel, he split up everybody. And then in the very next chapter, he decided, okay, if what he calls the nations won't listen, then I will choose a people to myself to set apart from the nations to show myself through them. And what I'll do is I'll begin to lay laws on them that they have to follow. And then by the time you get to Christ, obviously, like I pointed out, it says in one verse that slave traders will be in hell. It says Onesimus tells a slave owner, take back Onesimus
Do it
no
again.
longer as a
All
slave.
right, forgot all about it. Do you think I did it on purpose?
Like I think you guys are just doing what the typical internet atheist does, and they cherry pick verses and not look at the entire Bible. Because I mean, I understand why.
Aren't the Jews an ethnic group?
Are they an ethnic group? Well, I don't know because it says a mixed multitude came out of Egypt, and a mixed multitude, and there are, you can't tell by looking at somebody what a Jew looks like. For example, there are Ethiopian Jews. There are Sephardic Jews. Um, there are Ashkenazi Jews. Like there are, if you think that Jews are just one people, you've got some research to do.
Well, back then they were an ethnic group.
No,
Yeah.
it says in the Exodus when they came out of Egypt, it says a mixed multitude went out, and if you merely
Mixed.
got converted into Judaism, you would become a Jew. Like
I
for
would
example,
also
Ruth wasn't
Okay,
a Jew.
small point, but
I would also point out I would also point out real quick that the Jews were in the same region as the people around them in Egypt, so they would have all been the same color. Ethnic Jew just means you're an offspring or descendant of Abraham.
it
That's all that really is. Also, my other point would be hold on real quick. God met Abraham in his standards when he went to go make the covenant with him. When the ant because that was the standard was to tear apart an animal, put your hands in each other's hands and walk through that animal to make a covenant. And also the other thing was she pointed out Isaac or Abraham telling God to go kill Isaac. Well, Abraham knew that God told him and promised him that his offspring would be through Isaac, so he knew that he would either have to bring Isaac back or it wasn't going to happen.
Right, and that was a foreshadowing of God giving His only Son, Christ.
it just
So
Yes,
it
sir.
just seems
it
like
was a
it
prophet.
would be smart to tell every nation and every ethnic group about the God that he expects you to believe in.
As I said, he tried to deal with people before he chose Abraham to himself in the previous chapter,
See,
and they tried to build a temple to heaven, and so he split them all up, and in the very next chapter chose a single people to himself.
you're
He
deriving
also gave
meaning.
Sodom and Gomorrah a
You're
chance.
deriving meaning from this book. You're using your subjective reasoning to get to it because you have a moral standard
Now I'm just reading it in
that
chronological
no,
order.
because you're
You're
putting a
doing
bunch
that.
of things onto the verses that aren't clearly
No, I'm
stated.
not.
So
Na-
how you
Name
get
one.
there is by your reasoning because you want God to be a loving God.
Well,
We're
just
the
name
ones
one
being
thing what I'm doing right
objective
now.
because we're looking at this is giving you the laws for owning
You're cherry
slaves.
picking.
No, it's not a cherry pick. It's
Yeah.
looking
Name one
exactly
thing that I'm
at
doing
what
like that.
you're saying. You're
It's straight up a cherry
no,
pick.
no.
Just name one thing
I'm
that I did
addressing
like that.
things in the context.
So did we cherry pick
Just name one thing I
that
did like
Ted
that.
Bundy didn't kill 12-year-olds, or are we cherry picking just because we're focusing on the one time he did or the few times he did?
No, but obviously we disagree with what you're interpreting that to mean,
It's
and
not
we're
Yeah.
an
saying
interpretation.
you're relying
It
on
literally
yeah,
says,
you're relying on an
like,
English
Even know what
translation.
hermeneutics is. What is your hermeneutical approach to even interpret these passages?
I'm
How
not,
do you
listen.
how do you formulate
Any
the
person says
context of these
Hebrew slave,
passages?
he is to serve you for 6 years. Okay,
That's not
you're
Hebrew. I already
okay.
told
He
you
already
this
That's
in the
not even the
manuscript.
part that we're
Agreed.
contesting. The part that I'm
Hold on.
like objecting to is
Can we
the
bring in
word
Brenda?
purchase.
Brenda.
Okay, purchase.
Yeah, just like you
Purchase
can
is,
purchase an NBA player. So
but
what?
we're referring to humans that we're purchasing.
Yeah, but I've
So
already
Yeah, well,
pointed
so is
out.
you're the
LeBron
one
James. So
attaching
is
this
Michael
extra meaning.
Jordan.
How can you get to the fact that like clearly God knew it was wrong? He was trying to ease them into it. You have
Do you even
no
know?
basis
Okay,
in
let
saying
let me
except
answer
for
that.
your
Right.
interpretation.
She doesn't even know what the socioeconomic system was back then. It was
Let me,
debt. They were
well, let
they
me
were
just
buying
answer
people
that.
out of debt.
Let me answer that. Hold on, hold on. She asked a question. Let me answer her
Brenda
question.
says she's
Let me answer her
backstage.
question. Okay, I'll bring her on. Let me answer the question though, because the question that was asked was, I am bringing my subjective opinion to say that God was easing them. What's up, Brenda? That God was easing them on, and that I am using my reasoning to bring that up. No, I went straight to what Christ said. Moses gave you the law because of the hardness of your heart, but it was not that way from the beginning. And I tell you the
So
opposite. That's not me making it up. I'm deriving everything from Scripture. You guys don't have a solid hermeneutical
So
approach.
the reason I said facts don't care about your feelings is that, I mean, God should be saying that to us. If there's a society that loves enslaving and raping and stuff, I mean, He destroyed them previously. So I don't know why His standards of
But
punishment.
no, wait a second.
So
That
God
seems
should
like it would
be
apply to
God
you.
should be saying facts don't care about your feelings. Slavery is wrong, you guys.
To
He
you.
said that about Trump. Apparently, that's strong enough throughout to make it for him to change their minds on, but not slavery.
Yeah. But
How
think
you
about that
prepare
argument
food.
and how it applies to you, though. If you go, well, God was wrong because He allowed slavery, that could simply say facts don't care about your feelings. Like that's not a good argument. That's just a Ben Shapiro like throwaway
But
phrase. It
if
doesn't answer
Test,
anything.
slavery is wrong,
test. Can you hear
yeah,
me?
go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Brenda, we can hear you.
Okay, 'cause I need to test usually because
Yeah, I understand.
the sound selector sometimes. Okay, I'm listening.
Okay. Yeah, Praise. Did you want to make a point? I'm gonna go for maybe another 30 minutes. I'm on the
Right.
East Coast, so it's starting to get a little late
I
here.
don't. I forget the lady's name that was talking. Maybe I
Katie.
can. Katie. Maybe if you can do a little research on this, look up debt servitude or indentured servitude.
slavery.
Maybe you'll learn
Yeah.
something there.
That's slavery.
That's a form of slavery.
That's slavery.
Right. It means you buy people's
Yeah.
contracts. There's nothing
Yeah, that's
foul.
Can
There's
they
nothing
leave?
immoral
Can they
about
leave?
that.
no. It is immoral. It is immoral.
There's nothing immoral about
Yes.
financial transactions. So it's a financial
It's not a
transaction.
But you can
You
beat
can't
them.
And it's
trade
You can
voluntary.
beat them.
It is immoral.
So it's
Where does it
just
say you
it's
can
just
beat
a
him at?
simple. It says you can beat your slave. You just can't kill him. He can't die within a couple days.
It does not say
if
that. It
it's
does
Yes,
not
it
say
does.
that at all.
And if it's just
No, it
if it's just
doesn't.
a
Read
simple
it.
purchase
You're
and a
extrapolating.
financial contract,
Read it.
then why can
You're just straw manning the text. You're just straw
I'm
manning the
literally
text.
reading the text.
Read it then.
Why can Sarah give Hagar to her husband for her to rape and take
Okay,
her child? And why
So let's
can
let's look at
why
this.
can Rachel do the same thing to Bilhah and Leah to Zilpah? Like,
Okay, so let's say that you live.
if it's just a contract and it's just an exchange. When someone strikes
Okay,
his
so
male or female slave with a rod so that the slave dies under his hand, that act shall certainly be avenged. If, however, the slave
sounds like
survives for a day or two, he is not to be punished, since the slave is his own property.
Yes.
Exodus
It
21,
sounds
verse
like
Did you
12.
read
Yeah,
verses
praise
26
praise
through
is cool with
27?
that.
I
Praise
just
is
hate
cool with
repeating
that, aren't
myself
you?
over and over when I did a whole freaking stream on
Yeah.
this. I just don't feel
Yeah,
like going
but-
through all this again.
Okay. Maybe the slave issue. I'm sorry I came in late. I was watching another show. The title is Christian versus Secular Morality. Did you guys come to some sort of understanding regarding those?
You mean on the debate earlier or in this stream?
In this stream, because the
No.
title of the YouTube channel says Christian versus Secular Morality.
Well, that was because this is an after show to that debate.
Oh,
But
okay.
when we came on here, yeah, we kind of started talking about objective versus subjective morals, and Taylor claimed that he had an objective moral, but it was based on human reason, and so I just was pointing out that it wasn't objective.
Do you know what the difference is between objective and subjective?
Yes, we went over this. Objective. Go
Well,
ahead.
objective is of course mind independent, right?
That's what I said. But then they said that I just made up that definition.
No, that's the
That's the
philosophical
definition.
definition.
That's not the position I took. Go
That's
on, Brenda.
no, you're
It is
wrong.
what you guys
I'm
said.
sorry, but look up at the
I
Stanford
agree.
Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The difference
agree.
between the objective subjective distinction is mind independent versus mind dependent. That's the
Yeah,
distinction.
that's what I said too. I agree with you.
So just because
Yeah.
we can do things with our mind doesn't mean that some of those things aren't still true independent of
That's
that mind.
not the distinction. You're confusing the distinction again. So a good example would be Mount Everest is 26,000 feet above sea level. That's objective because it's not my opinion that Mount Everest is 26,000 feet above sea level. It's an objective fact. My opinion is that Mount Everest is a beautiful, majestic mountain, but that's subjective because it depends on me, the subject, and my personal evaluation. Somebody else could think it's horrible because their friend died on the mountain and they're sickened whenever they look at Mount Everest. So that would be subjective. That's the distinction to be made.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm of the position there's no such thing as objective morality.
I think that.
See, that's my whole point. So that's my whole point is I agree from an atheistic world. See, because they kept saying, "Oh, you're saying so only from your worldview where there's God, there can be objective moral." That doesn't make sense. But I think a lot of atheists agree with me on it, like Brenda, for example.
Well, there are objective secular morals. I don't happen to agree with those.
Right.
But
Exactly.
there's no problem with philosophical positions who propose some kind of objective, ethical, metaphysical, ethical system.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's all. That's all my point was
Makes sense.
earlier. You guys was just that.
Christianity is definitely a subjective moral system, though.
I do disagree with you, obviously, on that.
Yeah, maybe this
Because-
Friday, Brandon, you'll change your mind. And Skylar's debate.
Yeah. Praise is actually debating Skylar on this on Friday.
Well, it's subjective because the moral system, the morals depend on a subject, God.
No, he's an object.
Well, I'm an object too, but that doesn't mean that my evaluation of Mount Everest is objective. It's not independent of my mind. God's moral pronouncements are not independent of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're not saying that they're right because he pronounced them. That's not the
So
claim.
in virtue of
You
what?
kind of are,
In
though,
virtue-
because you said
but I told you-
In virtue of what?
He's the original. He created everything, so therefore
What-
it's
what-
standard.
No,
and
they're
it's
reflective,
objective, and it's
And they're
it's just not.
introspective.
By
Okay.
what criteria? By what criteria does God base his morals on?
So are you talking about the Euthyphro dilemma, right?
Well, I'm just asking what criteria he uses to make
Yeah, I
moral
thought Brendan
judgments.
believed in objective morality too, but I guess
Well, it
not.
can't be outside himself, or he wouldn't be God. So, I mean, it's
His
not, it's kind of a
character.
self-defeating
So
question.
Brenda, here's how I explained it earlier. I said I used the Euthyphro dilemma to explain this. I said, does God command things because they're good, or are they good because God commanded them? And I said it's a false dilemma. The term good in those sentences are just what God is the good. And here's how I explain that is because if, according to our worldview, you have to critique our worldview from like an inner worldview critique, right? If God is all that exists before humans or anything else is created, God's all that there is, okay, then there is no other standard by which to judge morality. Now God creates something. Whatever God creates, he is the standard of everything to them. So, for example, if he created Mount Everest, it's objectively a mountain, sure, because you get what I mean? It's grounded in God. There is no ground outside of God.
Brenda should watch that debate tonight
Yeah, I think so.
because I answered the flood question.
So you're going on the base assumption that God exists and God created the universe. Well, I don't have that assumption.
No, I agree with you.
So how come I can't have and think that there's an objective truth out there that's not created by God, that I can subjectively
Because-
view and I can subjectively kind of measure and try to figure out, but still think
Great
that
question.
there's a good, I still think I have just as much right to say that there's an objective truth as you do, just because I don't claim a God.
Well, great question. So I don't say that atheists can't know things are
That's
more
not. That's
immoral.
not.
You said, why can't I know?
No.
So
Why
that
can't I claim that there is a truth out there that I
you can.
can be correct about or can be incorrect? So there can be an objective moral stance.
Because you have no standard or basis. Respectfully, you have no standard or basis to say that.
Humans try to subjectively get to it, but
How do you know God's a good
the
standard?
truth is there.
I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means to say truth exists. Truth is just a property of sentences. So sentences are either true or false. There's no such thing as a substance that has the property of being true.
Okay.
It's just sentences, and sentences are just in your head. So these are just.
Do you think that there is a right or wrong way to go about things?
No.
So I think that there is. I just think that humans subjectively try to figure out what it is. But I think when it comes down to it,
Through naturalistic means, yeah. You're not going to find it through naturalistic means, so good luck with that.
okay, good luck with what you're doing. You can't find the objective truth either because you don't.
Well,
have
I
the
mean,
mind of God.
by definition, God is ontological, though. We have something that transcends reality. So yes, we have more justification for that.
You're just using big words that you heard.
No, I'm just using
the big words.
philosophical
Don't use the big
language,
words
Brandon.
that you don't
How
understand.
do you know God?
No, I understand them.
Do you know what the word
Yeah,
ontology means? Do you know what the word ontology means?
Yes, the nature or essence of something. What is?
So by
I know what it
definition, God
means.
exists. So by definition, God exists.
Yeah, I can use the
Huh?
ontological argument to
So
validate
by
that.
definition, I have a unicorn that exists. It exists by definition.
Well, if it has the same properties of God, then yeah, you're just equivocating
No,
the
it doesn't have the same
being.
properties
Is
as
that
God.
it exists?
I have a unicorn.
Unicorns do exist. They're an animal with one horn.
Well, actually, if you guys look on my YouTube channel, I've pointed out on multiple occasions, atheists always bring up magic and unicorns and leprechauns
Right.
way before theists ever do. Theists are just talking about logic.
Well, you know,
No, theists are just talking about logic and so on,
yeah,
and then
I
atheists
know.
always bring up leprechauns.
People-
Well,
people
Well, I
did-
mean, unicorns are contingent by definition, though. So you need
I've
something
pointed it out
that
many times.
People did
is not
believe-
contingent.
You
Good luck
can't
with that.
define. Immanuel Kant brought this objection up a long time ago. Existence is not a predicate. So you can't use existence to define things into existence.
Yeah.
I would say because you don't start
No,
with
that
the
wasn't our point.
standard.
That was Taylor's point.
I would say because you don't start with the standard of God, you can't make sense of rationality, reasoning, or laws of logic that are abstract, immaterial in their
have to,
nature.
or else you can't claim that that's a good standard.
What is that?
That's
That's
incredibly
precept?
arrogant.
Yeah,
So,
Brandon,
Yes,
You
it's
never
precept.
said God's
Hold on,
being is
I want you
necessary.
guys to respond to this. How are you supposed to know if God is a good standard or not if you have no basis in logic?
what do you mean by good?
If it's objective, what do you mean?
Moral
Okay, that's
perfection. Moral perfection is the definition of
How
good.
do you
Moral
know that God is
perfection.
morally perfected? He's just saying.
I can
it.
read his word.
Anyone can say they're morally perfect. I can say it right now.
I can
It's self-revelatory.
can read his
I can
word,
make
and my
an argument.
consciousness tells me
But
so.
other people say that about different gods. So why do I have a different conscience than you do?
Well, their gods fall short when it gets down to the attributes and
So why do I
characteristics.
To
have
be
a
honest, the
different
only
conscience?
thing that
So one way-
separates you and me is grace.
Why was I not?
So one way to
raised?
test.
Because
So-
God determines to allow you to have what you want or to
So-
give you grace
I want
because
grace.
you
This
don't
is
want
the
him.
divine. This is the divine hiddenness. This is the divine.
You don't want
hiddenness,
grace clearly.
Non-resistant, non-believer argument.
Can you repeat that, Brenda?
We've sort of segued into the divine hiddenness argument, which is non-resistant non-believers, right? Which is a usually put in against Calvinists.
Yeah, so
Yeah, so
I
who
am a
brought that up?
Calvinist.
Taylor brought that up.
I would love
I am a
grace
Calvinist.
if anyone's got it.
God has it. All you got to do is just ask
I
him.
already did, never got any response.
So
I
Brenda,
don't
I
believe
thought
you
had
actually
a-
knew Christ.
Yeah, because his
Brenda, I
Otherwise,
thought-
you wouldn't be
bad at
saying this.
communicating that message, apparently.
No, it's because you don't really do much research outside of the Catholic school you went to.
You don't
yeah, I
know.
do.
You don't know what research Taylor has done. I mean, you're being incredibly.
You guys have been
arrogant right now.
demonstrating it all
I
night.
showed my
You guys have been
We've
demonstrating
cited-
it all
we've-
night.
We've brought up a number of verses and we've cited, where they're coming from. We've, to say that we don't know what we're talking about is just, it's plain rude. I mean, we can disagree about the
Well, your synopsis of
interpretation
slavery is
because
pretty
we, are actually
fallacious.
people who think and we judge things, whether you want to believe it or not. But the Bible is contradictory, so you really, you're the one interpreting.
I don't even think you know what that word means.
Yeah, I do actually. I know what the word contradiction.
It's actually a tautology. Did you know that? Did you know the word contradiction in philosophical terms denotes a tautology? Are you even prepared
No,
to
that's
even...
wrong. That's another
No, that
big
is
word.
true. I can give you citations, Brandon. Don't tell me when I'm always wrong when it's like you just tried to say this.
The contradiction is not a tautology.
It is, though.
No, it's not. A equals A is a
You want me to give you the
tautology.
citations for it? I mean,
A equals A is a tautology, right?
hold on. I'm going to give you the citations for this.
I don't need citations because I actually know what I'm talking about.
No,
A
obviously you
equals
don't,
A
though.
equals A. A equals A is a tautology.
Yeah, so what you guys may not know
A
that-
equals not A is a contradiction.
So what you guys may not know, Brenda and
Two
I,
denotes a tautology. It's the same thing.
No, they're not the same.
Yes, they are. One's a negative and one's a positive. Yes, they are.
Are negative and positive the same?
One's a positive. One's a positive
negative and positive
epistemology, and one's a
the same?
negative epistemology.
Is 1 equal to negative 1?
Oh my gosh! I
Is
think
it?
get all these citations.
Isn't 1 equal to negative 1? Is it?
No, that's a self.
No, it's not, is it?
But that's
equals-
true in every world, though. That is a
one.
tautology.
What? No, that's a contradiction. 1 equals 1 is a tautology.
Right, but that's what I'm saying.
No, you're not. You're saying they're
it's true
the same.
in every world. It's true that it's false in every world. That's what I'm trying to say. It's a tautology.
Tautology
That's
is
not a
saying
tautology.
the same thing twice in different words.
No, a tautology means that it's true in every world. It's an absolute
What
truth.
tautology means.
It does, because I even did a stream on it for 3 hours.
The fact that you don't understand something and did a stream about it doesn't make it true.
one at a time.
Neither can you.
One at a time. I think we're devolving here into
I think so.
an argument. Like we're just arguing. So like, what my thing is with this channel, Converse Contender, is just like conversation contenders. Like I like people to come in and contend for what they believe, but I don't want to get to the point where people are just arguing to keep their point of view. Like everybody at the base, I think, has like what they believe. And a lot of times when you get into arguments about things, people like to stick to what they believe. In fact, studies have shown like if you confront somebody with beliefs that contradict theirs, they cling tighter to their beliefs a lot of times. But what I like to do is try to pry underneath and say, look, here's something you may be missing. And as most people that's been on my channel know, one of my favorite things is when somebody scratches their head and goes, I haven't thought about that. Or like if somebody tells me something and I go, I had never heard of that. So like I'm interested in conversations and like I don't want to just devolve into argument. And so that's why I said early on, I don't want this to turn into like us versus them like kind of thing. I'd rather have a conversation. And so is there any other points that Taylor, you and Katie would like to make before we take off here in a few minutes?
Well, I would just like to say that, again, I don't think it's been addressed that you need to be able to have logic and reasoning in order to even come to the conclusion that God is real or God is good or his moral system is true or good.
That's a presupposition, though.
or else you have no reason to believe it. So
Okay, well, let's use an example. Let's say that I didn't use my logic and reason, right? And I were to just be something was to be revealed to me, and I could either logically try to dissect it and say, "Wait a second, is this true?" and try to break it all down, or I could say, based on what I know, I'm going to accept this. And in that, you wouldn't necessarily. I think what you're trying to say is you necessarily need laws of logic. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying you need reasoning in order to give me a reason to believe.
Well, I agree with that. That's a tautology right there. Like, you need reason for reason. I mean,
Yeah,
So, Brenda, I want to put this into the chat for you, okay? This shows that a contradiction is a tautology. I'm going to give you the paper.
all right. So you guys can have that discussion. In fact, if you guys want to debate some of those things, we'll have you on my channel. In fact, some of you guys may not know, Brenda and I had a long discussion on a lot of these topics a little while back, and we actually had a really good talk. There wasn't any.
Yeah, I just get a little bit agitated when people say things that are just flat out wrong and they don't know what they're talking about, but they have that Dunning-Kruger belief that they know what they're talking about when they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I get the same way. I don't.
A tautology and a contradiction are two very different statements within logic.
Well, he put a citation in the chat there. You guys can discuss that. But yeah. So Taylor, though. So your point about laws of logic, does that apply to yourself? So you can't, like, for example, it seemed like you agreed with me that objectivity is independent of human thought or reason. But then it seemed like you said you need reason to come to that conclusion.
I would say that it's something that's independent, like Brenda said, independent of any mind, not just human minds.
Okay. But then you said to locate or to come about one of these things, we can come about them through human reason.
Could I ask a question?
You can reason things that are true, independent of your mind.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you have an actual?
Hang on a second.
Do you have an actual link to that paper? Because that's a $43 paper. Have you read it?
Yeah.
Have you read it?
Yes, I have.
The actual paper, because the link is a $43 paper.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna. If you want, I could put it on MediaFire and send it to your email.
Yeah. Shoot it over to the email. All right. Go ahead, Taylor. I'm sorry. What was that?
I'll take that link as well.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Does anyone else want that?
Taylor, what was your point? What was your point about that it's independent of mind? Objectivity is independent of mind, but we can come about objective morals by what means?
We can come to understand things that are independent, that are true, independent of our minds through reasoning and logic, and we cannot do that using just faith.
So we can come about things that are independent of our minds by using our minds.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, you can look at Mount Everest, for the example. You can measure it using our minds, but it's still true, objectively independent of what our minds are measuring or thinking about.
It's
okay.
Still,
So let's apply
many
that.
Feet tall, regardless of if we know it or not. But we use our reason to figure it out.
We can't. We are minds. We can't do anything without our minds. But
and so
the fact.
So here's what I'm asking: is when we get to morality. Okay, so here's what I'm asking: when we get to morality, an example like saving someone from dying. Now I'm saying it's objectively true that we should save someone, and I'm saying, how do we know that? Is it based on what we think about it, or is there some other way we can tell?
Well, based on a system of how we behave, we can choose systems that are clearly untrue because they contradict themselves and contradict reality, or we can create systems that are consistent with reality and consistent with themselves. And I've described where I believe the ought comes from, and that's first of all, you have an ought when you're using logic to be valid with your logic, and secondly, our ought to maximize the good states of existence comes from the fact that the universe itself ought to exist.
So Taylor, we're the ones who are constructing these concepts and models.
No, these concepts exist independently of our minds, but we are able
Can
to
you justify that ought, though?
Sorry?
Can you justify that ought? Because
Yeah.
it's just saying something is ought to be doesn't make it true. It could be just a illusion in your brain or something that's a figment of your
Well, I
imagination.
can justify that because the mere fact that something exists means that something should exist because the
Well, then I can say the same about God. What's the difference between me saying God is necessarily exists and what you're saying?
Because you don't
I
have
can
any
point-
proof that God exists.
Yeah.
I know I exist, unless you're arguing for
Yeah, but
Proof.
what do you think Taylor's saying, though?
Proof
what I-
requires.
Unless
It's the
your
same-
philosophy is
it's the same
solipsism,
line of
like
reasoning.
you think you're in the Matrix, then I think we can all work from the assumption that we exist.
Even in the Matrix, all this logic still makes sense.
You still need justification for that, though. It's
Proof
just,
requires proof requires a justification, a
Just
standard, or a
justify it.
basis that you can say
Right.
we know where this comes from or how this, not just how this works, but where it comes
Yeah,
from.
so
You can't just say
the fact that nothing
Sorry.
else is logically incoherent means that something is by definition ought to exist.
Messenger, did you want to add something?
No, I'm good right now.
Okay.
I just wanted
the universe
to
doesn't
know.
necessarily exist, though. It's contingent, especially the mathematical level. The universe had a beginning, so it is contingent.
I just want to know how information like abstract laws of logic exist outside of your own mind in this
They don't.
universe.
They don't.
They don't. So you
No.
can't apply them to the universe.
Of course you can.
How can you apply something that doesn't exist outside of your mind to the universe?
Well, you can use it to describe the universe.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm
The
talking
law
about, like,
describes it.
I'm-
It's universally applicable.
I'm talking about being able to type into information into a machine that allows us to be able to do what we're doing right now and have a
Machines
That's
are
screen
because-
pure
with a
logic.
picture on it.
Yeah. You want to know how computers work?
No, I'm saying the fact that we're able to do such things with materials in the universe and be able to produce radio waves sending information that actually describes something or prescribes something is proof itself that there's something transcendent or something abstract immaterial
How
that
does-
Why does it
exists.
have to be a God?
How does the fact that we can do things with matter prove that God exists?
Or that anything
Because
is
we're using
true.
immaterial things like
I
laws
can-
of logic.
No, we're not.
Radio waves are material.
I
What
can,
is the
yes,
law of logic?
I can
Laws
use.
of
I
logic
can
are
use.
found nowhere in scripture.
I can make a campfire and use it to make smoke signals and send information to somebody in their teepee far away. That doesn't mean that God exists.
But you're using information
So
that
what?
already exists.
No, it doesn't.
The
What do you mean
DNA,
you, Brenda?
the
What does that
DNA
mean?
and the numbers in the universe that we're able to apply to the universe don't exist.
I'm not using DNA when I use smoke signals. What are you
No, I'm
talking about?
saying DNA is information, and so is
Well, so are smoke
numbers.
signals.
DNA
So are
So is
smoke
numbers.
signals. Smoke
So are
signals are
numbers.
information.
yes.
Did the
but
universe determine you to do that smoke signal, or did you choose that in your own autonomy?
Can you
Okay.
can you focus on the topic, which is apparently?
Well, no, it's key.
No,
It's
I
key to
just-
his-
no, it's
key to
not,
his
because
point,
I
though.
just
Colin is confused about the ontology of information.
no. I want to know how you're able to use abstract universal laws of logic that don't exist outside of your mind and apply them to materialistic objects that that aren't uniform to those laws of
I wanna
logic
know
that
how
are
Do they
abstract.
exist?
Take the God.
Okay. Do they
Do
exist? Do they exist in my mind?
Sorry, can I interrupt for a
Numbers?
second? I gotta go to bed. I got work in the morning. Thank you all. I appreciate the
All right, Katie.
conversation.
Yep.
Thanks for stopping by.
Later.
Colin,
Can I?
Colin.
Yes.
Colin, do these ideas, numbers, and ideas exist in my mind?
Everything exists. in your-
Yes. Anything exists inside of your mind, but they're immaterial.
So, well, no, they're physical.
Your consciousness is physical.
Yeah,
Yes, it's in my mind.
consciousness is a term of unknown origin that replicates what chemical and electrical impulses are going on within the brain. Because people can't recreate this or replicate, quote, consciousness because they don't have enough understanding of the chemicals and electrons, don't mean that they don't originate
Wait
from.
a second, Messenger.
So
Are you
consciousness,
saying, wait a second,
consciousness needs
Messenger,
to
are
be
you
with
saying that-
knowledge.
The
What
brain
is
is
it?
reducible.
Science.
Conscious is not reducible.
Wait a second.
What-
Yeah, I
yeah,
was about to say, Messenger.
yeah.
Are you saying that's all consciousness is, like, as in a matter of fact?
I'm saying
Consciousness is
that if I stick an ice pick through your brain,
Mhm.
your level of consciousness changes because I impacted the material structure of your brain.
I think
Yeah,
my
it's a-
brain.
it's
Wait
a
a second. Wait a second. Wait a
computer
second.
for
My brain
consciousness.
activity changes. How do you know that
Well,
my
we
consciousness?
can literally remove memories.
Because you're assuming
Wait a
that.
second.
Hold on a second. When
ahead.
you're coming from a neurological standpoint, which means the essence and energy and nature for which we exist and process information and declare those things through our voices, are material in their nature. Just because we use a term like consciousness, which describes the "I think for therefore I am" type concept from Rene Descartes, does not mean it's still not derived itself from chemical and electrical processes.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Wait a second.
Challenge
Hold
the
on.
material point of
Let's
view
let
as well.
Messenger.
consciousness means to be with
Hang on a second.
knowledge.
Colin, hang on a second. Let's let Messenger finish.
If
But I
stick a
do think that
prefrontal cortex, you're not going to have much knowledge.
But I do.
No,
Yeah.
I've
But here's the
studied
thing.
this
Here's the thing. I've
with,
heard. Yeah. So I'm familiar with this. but-
Idealists such as Johanna Rods and several others. I'm experienced with this.
Yeah, so here's the other thing I would point is that if I have a radio and I were to just like break the antenna, I wouldn't get the signal. But that doesn't mean that there's something wrong, like there's something up with the signal. That means there's something wrong with the antenna or the radio. So in the same way,
you're talking
I'm
about
sorry?
something because you're talking about the radio waves exist in the air regardless if you have a receptor.
that's the consciousness.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's not the consciousness because if you really want to talk about human beings and relating them to something material, it'd be better to use a computer than a radio.
Well, it would be better for your example.
No.
But
I'm talking about from remember my studies and my credentials are in psychology, which is based on what human.
But that's why I ask you.
Are. So what I'm trying to say is like you're absolutely right in terms of if I speak to you and you don't have the ability to hear, okay. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that I'm not producing information for you to be able to receive. It just means that you have an inability to receive it. But if I wrote it down, if I sit there and gave it in some other type of form or medium, then you could receive that information.
So but here's the thing is you define consciousness in totally materialistic terms. Can you define that again? And then
I said
recognize, go ahead.
We know that the way that we experience life here on Earth, and I cannot speak to a potential afterlife.
But define what you define as consciousness.
Our consciousness is derived based on chemical and electrical reactions and formulations within our physical brain.
And do you know that that's all it is, or is that just like are you claiming that, or are you saying that's part of it, or are you saying that's it? Because there could be more to it, obviously, right? That you're unaware of.
But we don't. Again, I can't speak to an afterlife that I haven't experienced yet.
Well, not an afterlife. I'm saying in this life. I'm saying could there be more to consciousness than
I don't think there's more to it in terms of that because we have our dreams, and dreams are amazing constructs of our reality. We have obscure dreams. We have dreams that are based on desires and wants. We have dreams that are based on fears and losses and worries. You know, we have all these things that our brain formulates and works out in our sleep so that we can reset and our brain isn't constantly stuck in terms of anxiety and depression and anger and stress. That's the whole purpose of dreams, is to undo what the conscious mind is doing in a subconscious way during dreaming. So when you're sitting there talking about these impulses, whether they be chemical in their nature or electrical in their nature, they're still physical and material in their nature while we're here.
Because I think we might be equivocating on the term consciousness. Because you said conscious as the...
But consciousness... But consciousness is you're starting to get into things of an
Wait a second.
abstract.
I just mean something like self-awareness. You were using it as in the antecedent to
Can I ask a
subconscious.
question after this too, to Messenger?
Yeah, sure.
Your self-awareness comes in your prefrontal cortex. That's where your experiential and episodic memories are. So
what about people who are completely brain dead who have experiences?
Well, they have experiences, but how do they process those experiences from a cognitive standpoint? They can't do it without access to the prefrontal cortex in a healthy way. No difference if somebody was, either slightly or severely mentally handicapped.
So that was my whole point about the radio is people who are brain dead who still have conscious experience. It's like the radio signal.
You said brain dead. You said brain dead. What do you mean that they still have experience?
Well, they whenever they're okay. So someone who's brain dead, who they brought back, has said, "I had an experience during this whole time," and they said, "No, you were clinically brain dead during this whole time." And so I don't remember the guy who wrote. There's a scholar who just wrote a pretty good book on this. I don't have the reference on me, but I will email it to you, Messenger. But I would just say. That's kind of like, I would just say that that's probably a self-defeater for that.
Well, at the same time, if you went and experienced a chemical called DMT,
sure,
which your brain produces in small amounts during sleep, but it produces high amounts in either close to death or death experiences. Or if you take the chemical of DMT, enhances it in a non-life-threatening way over a 15 to 30-minute period, you would have those same experiences that you're describing for somebody who is in a potentially comatose state.
Yeah, DMT you're just describing, though, wouldn't...
Go ahead, Praise.
Yeah, my question to Messenger is, can you demonstrate something that is material or physical objectively exists?
Well, I mean, no, I don't. Well, yes, you can from an objective standpoint, from what we understand about psychology, understanding biological, cognitive experience, and emotional processes. I believe that you can articulate those inner determinants of those processes in an objective way. At the same time, you can have a subjective interpretation of what they mean and their value that they hold to.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, my point is, in physics especially, there's nothing in reality that is proven to be objectively material or physical. So that's my point on that.
That's not true.
It is true because there's so many.
True.
It is
then
true.
Then back it up. You're just spouting nonsense again.
The double slit experiment. It goes
what about
on and on. The point is that
you don't understand. Are you? What is what level of?
You want me to give you the citations after citations?
I want you to explain to me. I just
keep giving them to you, and you keep on telling me I don't know what I don't know.
Yes.
Brenda.
Do you know?
Brenda.
Holy crap! Who's making all that noise?
Whoever's typing needs to mute real quick. Brenda, try to avoid like terms like nonsense, and rather just ask clarifying questions of
right.
And no. Okay. You too, Praise. Like, can you substantiate what you're asserting? Can you give me more information that I may be missing that would help me understand where you're coming from? And I think if we would present it that way, it avoids a lot of the emotionally charged responses.
Right.
What level of quantum mechanics are you? You third year calc?
I don't. That's an appeal to an authority or appeal to have.
If you don't understand the calculus and the physics, you don't know what you're talking about.
Do you understand?
You don't need to know that. You don't need to know that to have a basic understanding, an elementary understanding. Well, here's your citation, Brenda. I'm putting it in the YouTube for you. There you go.
Praise, hold on. Brenda, what's your level of credentials and where are you coming from when it comes to quantum mechanics or the double slit experiment?
It's not terribly hard to understand. The double slit experiment shows that.
You asked Praise if he had credentials, so I'm saying, do you have credentials in the same area?
I'm not making pronouncements about the double slit.
You did, though. You said that I don't understand something.
Yeah, I'm not the one claiming that it shows some kind of material or immaterial reality. That's quantum woo. It's easily debunked.
But it's
not. I just put a citation there. So
that's
all
not
right.
a citation. You linked me to a popular science magazine.
No, it's livescience.com. That is
That's not a
legitimate,
journal.
reputable science.
It's not a paper. It's not a paper.
Yeah.
I'll put a journal for you then. For gosh sake,
I don't. No, why don't you just explain
fair.
what it is about explain to me what it is about the double slit experiment that you think proves what do you think it proves?
Okay, if you want me to give an explanation, I will. I just need the time to do it, but I don't know if it's going to take over the time. I don't know how much Converse
It's really
has.
simple, actually. It's not very hard.
Well, it's not as simple as what you're making it, because even they are still baffled.
I'll explain it if I have time to explain it, but I need the time.
Well,
all right, you guys. I'm sorry, I stepped away for a few minutes. You sound like it kind of evolved into a big discussion there. What I want to do is, I do need to wrap up, but I'd like to go around and give everybody just like one more chance to speak and just kind of give their thoughts of the discussion tonight, because although at times it did get heated, I think that everybody kind of learned something from this. And whether you had never heard an argument before or something like that, whether you believe that it's true or not, but maybe it gave you another idea. I always say this about books, like that. Like, I can buy a book and get so much from one page, like more than reading the rest of the book. Sometimes it's just one idea that can, lend you this new perspective. So if you want, we can start with Brenda and move around, or we can start with Messenger, either way, and move around, and everybody kind of give like like if you have anything else to add to the conversation before we go.
I don't really have anything to add. I didn't learn anything from here.
No, you didn't.
No,
I'm muted.
no, because there's nothing. There was nobody here that is able to. So, good discussion. I'm sorry I get heated, but I have very low tolerance for Dunning-Krugers.
Yeah, you should be more tolerant.
I don't think I need to be.
Yeah. Well, I just mean that because Brenda is LGBTQ, so I just was, you should be more tolerant. But
Sounds like it.
But anyway, well, Brenda can be pleasant sometimes and have a conversation. So I'm not, hating.
Yeah, I'm not the one to judge or anything. We're supposed to love them.
Yeah. So
way.
So I would just say is anybody else? Is there anything you guys would like to add before we go then?
I'll add one thing, but I don't know if anybody else has anything. Like when it comes down again to these type of conversations, I always talk to people, and I have a link. I have a video on my Unplugged from Worldly Thinking channel called, How to Improve Communication. Mm-hmm. And it talks about having active and empathetic listening. Active listening is just things like paraphrasing information, reflecting feelings back on somebody to try to better understand their situation. When it comes to empathetic listening, it's really trying to understand it from somebody's perspective. Because if you believe that somebody's providing misinformation, they're usually doing so because that's the best that they understand.
Yeah,
that's everybody's presenting themselves based on their prior experiences and the information that they've been subjected to. So when somebody disagrees with you, that's why. They just don't have the same information that you're willing to provide. If people are more curious to understand where people are coming from, them rather than object to them to help get them to some level of truth or awareness of well-being.
Yeah, so
that's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna take care of my kid for a second.
Yeah, go ahead, man. I appreciate you adding that, because I think you're right. It's like when you get home from a hard day, like if your wife was to say, "Listen, we got to talk," then you're gonna be like, "Wait, well, hold on, don't come at me like that." But if she says something like, "Can you help me with something?" then you're gonna be like, "Yeah, what can I do? Like, what do you need?" And it may be about the same thing, but it's how you present it. So I agree with you. Maybe I could work on that as well, but that's why I'm having these discussions. What about you, Taylor? You want to add something? Taylor, you still there?
I think he is. He just muted his mic.
Oh, okay. You want to add something, Taylor, before we go?
I can't hear anything right now.
Oh, did you
Just so
want?
you
Do you
guys
want to
know.
add something before we go? All right, maybe he's unable to hear us. All right,
Yeah, more than likely.
Praise.
So
What about you guys?
yeah, I would love to have these discussions if I can have time to explain things and not get accused of stuff. But I'll just try to give a quick explanation to why
Yeah, go ahead.
reality is not objective in quantum mechanics. It's because that in quantum mechanics, all reality is described as mathematical or mathematical hypotheticals, and something has to bring it into existence, and that is what they call collapsing of the wave function. And there's nothing that can collapse the wave function except
Hang on a second. I'm gonna mute
intelligence and mind. That's it. Only
Yeah.
mind can collapse the wave function. I mean, that's so empirically demonstrated. And I gave citation for that.
Oh yeah, I've heard
So
Johan talk about that.
yeah, I mean, but these are in reputable sources, though. This is not like creationmagazine.com or something. No, this is in science magazines. I mean, science news and some other ones. Like, so I've shared that. It's out there. So maybe it's just cognitive dissonance. I don't know.
Yeah. What about you, Colin? You want to add anything?
Sure. I'd like to just say I'm really glad we had this debate and this discussion too. Really thankful you had me on and all of us. It was a really fruitful discussion, I believe, especially for the audience sake, not just ours. That's why we do it. The other point I'm going to add on is information is exactly that information. It conveys a meaning or purpose, and there's nothing that could convey meaning or purpose from an ungoverned, unguided universe that is apparently ruled by laws of logic that only exist inside only exist inside the mind, human brain.
Bob, you're late.
But I don't know if Taylor's going to say anything. I think I'm about done.
All right,
I appreciate
that's
it.
good. Yeah, man, appreciate you guys coming in. Hey, listen, everybody, if you haven't already subscribe. If you haven't liked this video, let's like it. That'll let me know that you guys are interested in seeing more of these discussions. And if anybody is interested in coming in, you can just email me at conversecontender@gmail.com, and I'll bring you in our next one. I'm gonna have after shows, as much as possible, but I'm going to definitely have some more discussions with philosophers. I might have Ben Arbor back on, but I've got a couple others that I'm planning on getting in here. And then Praise has a debate with Scholar Fiction on Friday. And then I'm having a discussion with Scholar Fiction next Wednesday, and I might have something coming up on Tuesday as well. We'll see about that. But yeah, hit like on the video and check out these other people's channels as well. So Taylor, appreciate you coming in. You guys check out his channel as well, and Messenger Praise. I always appreciate you guys. So
Likewise,
all right
brother.
then. Well, appreciate everybody coming out, and we'll see you guys on the next stream.
Thanks, CC.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having
it.
us.
Later.
See you guys, buddy.
Bye.